pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, good evening. It is Tuesday, May 28th. Yesterday was Memorial Day, which was a holiday, so we're on to Tuesday today. Madam Clerk, with the roll call.
Councilor Perry.
Present.
Councilor Hilton.
Present.
Councilor DiMederos.
Present.
Councilor Katz.
Present.
Councilor Coulter.
Present.
Councilor Cook. Present. Councilor Driggs.
Present.
All present.
Okay, we'll start off with the consent agenda. We have town council minutes from May 1st, which was a special meeting, and regular and executive meeting minutes from just about 2 weeks ago on May 13th. I'd like to again thank the clerk and the staff for such a quick turnaround on these minutes. You hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? We acknowledge receipt of minutes from boards, commissions, and committees. We have 2 sets from the boards of canvassers. The Tiverton Open Space and Land Preservation Commission, the Harbor and Coastal Waters Management Commission, and 2 sets from the Open Space and Land Preservation. We would also acknowledge the receipt from our treasurer of the April budget and revenue reports. We have various correspondence. One resolution from Foster's Town Council declaring the town of Foster a Second Amendment sanctuary town. The topic of the Second Amendment is a specific agenda item, which of course will come up and will be for public debate. This consent agenda item is merely to acknowledge receipt of that resolution from Foster. From across the bay, or across the river, I should say, from Portsmouth, 2 resolutions. One in support of legislation to establish an Ocean State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Fund, and a second in support of an amended Plastic Waste Reduction Act. We also have 2 from Warren, also across the water. A resolution regarding Senate 410 and House 5671 on plastic bag bans to amend the language to exclude the uniformity clause, and a second resolution on stabilization of state educational aid. And finally, an action to reconfirm our approval on May 13th of the corrected dates of event. We had a full public hearing on the Megan L. Cordier Memorial Foundation's permission to hold the 11th annual Miles for Megan bike ride and walk. The actual date of that is Saturday, September 21st of this year, starting and finishing at Town Farm, with registration at 7:30 a.m. This is on the consent agenda, just to correct the typo on the dates. Are there any councilors that would like to remove any consent agenda items for further discussion?
I would. 4A1 and B11. 4B11.
4B11.
Or
Second. I don't know if you need a second.
Any other items? Okay. All right, so may I have a motion to approve A2, A3, B2, B3, C, D, and E?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Denise and a second from Justin. All those in favor? Very well. We have no executive session tonight, so we do have on the agenda our general open public forum. We've had 4 people sign up. All 4 of the signer-uppers, if you will, are on an agenda item on the Second Amendment. So if it's okay with all of you, I'd like to hold your comments until that comes into the public session, and you will be first in queue for that. Proceeding on with public hearings, these are advertised, and I, as always, apologize for the name mispronouncements. Pang Jiang and Chris Mahan, 1250 East Road. This is a backyard/outdoor wedding on June 8th, 2019, from 5:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Looking for approval of a sound variance and also approval of a special event permit, subject to meeting all legal requirements. I guess we usually take 2 votes on that. This is an open public hearing advertised. Would anybody like to be heard on this matter?
Want to hear from them? Are they here?
Questions or comments? Okay.
Are the people here?
Would the applicants like some publicity in case we crash your wedding? Okay. All right. Well, hearing that there's no comment, may I have a motion to approve the sound variance as requested?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? And may I have a motion to approve the special event permit, subject to meeting all legal requirements?
Second.
Second for Donna. All those in favor? Great, thank you. Continuing with advertised public hearings, we are looking at amending fines and fees. More specifically, these are planning board, police department, and recreation fees. I believe this is an annual event, more or less. And do we have a sponsor that would like to introduce any of these, or should
Nancy, do you?
I just, well, I think the planning board, certainly, we know where those came from. On the police department fees, were those recommended to the police staff?
The chair of the planning board.
Okay, why don't we start with the planning board? Is that fair? Okay. Had a nice heads up from the planning board that this was coming, I think maybe at the last meeting, so, and now we're back in a more formal
Hi,
way.
Susan Gill, Planning Board. And if you had any questions, just as a, I guess, overview was, this is our fee schedule that we charge when applications come in. We did a couple of minor adjustments, deleted a couple of items that we found that really weren't pertinent anymore. And I think there were just a couple of minor adjustments to prices, to the fees, and that's based on basically reviewing the last year, the amount of hours that it takes to process applications. Sometimes minor subdivisions will take 1 or 2 meetings, sometimes they'll take 6 meetings. And when, it generates all of that, that's more time by professional staff and organizing. So we just thought as an average to increase that one slightly. I can't think of which other one. We have the solar ordinance, or the solar in there this time. The other one was the development plan review. Those would be like for commercial entities, and that one we did increase because if that is basically bypasses the planning board, that basically entails all professional staff, DPW, building office, planning department, and it's all basically staff work, and that can involve a fair amount of time to process. The second sheet is the escrow. And basically what that is like a checking account that we establish for the consultant engineer. So these are paid for by the applicant, and it's for their reviews or their site inspections. I think the adjustments on that was the multi-house condominium project. We deleted that one in the rural residential because basically those fall into either minor or major subdivisions or commercial projects, so it was kind of redundant. I don't think we did any major changes to that. I guess the as-built we increased a little bit because that would involve a site visit. But these are funds that we establish with an application. They're drawn upon during the course of review, and then once a project is completed, any remaining funds are returned to the applicant. We don't hold those or bank them. So it basically serves as a checking account for us to use our consultants. So, and then the last of it was just basically some survey of similar-sized towns and what they charge. And that was some of the other information we used to come to that on. So.
May I ask a question?
I do.
Yeah.
Either Donna or I.
Yeah, go ahead, I have one myself.
Donna, you
Is
can
it
go
okay?
first.
All right. So my question is that the fees, are they used to cover the cost, and how much of the cost do they cover? Where are we trying to not raise taxes to cover the cost, where the person having the building and coming forward with the plans will eventually cover the cost of lawyers? And I'm not quite sure why you went up on them.
Well, what we do with the fees is basically to cover the costs that basically town staff require, time utilized in order to process a fee. We're not allowed to make profit off of it, so we try and come up with something that's reasonable, but that will cover it. I mean, usually in my head, if I average, like $50 an hour, So if you say an administrative subdivision, that only at most allows for 4 hours of time. But by the time you certify it, write a decision, record it, if it goes before the planning board, you involve DPW input, you've already surpassed your 4 hours. So, these are basically just kind of going by what's established in other communities, what we've done in the past, and just trying to make it reasonable to cover the basic costs. I think the planning board doesn't generate a lot of income revenue over the course of a year, so we're not making profit off of this, but it's to help defray the costs that's required by town staff to process an application. Does that
Thank
answer
you.
it?
That was kind of my question. So this reflects the amount of work it takes to do it, and that's why there's an increase, because you've realized over the past year
Right.
it's taken longer.
Right.
How do we compare to other communities?
Well,
Are
that's
we?
with the backup. I don't know if you
All
still
right.
have the backup.
I did see
surveyed
that.
some-
So we're
Yeah, I surveyed some other towns. I mean, on a couple of items, we're a little bit higher, some were lower.
we used to be
We're kind of-
lower a couple
Right,
of years
so
ago.
a couple of years ago, we tried to do some catch-up to put us more in the median. But like solar, like the, doing solar applications, I mean, it takes, several public hearings. There's a lot, site visits, there's a lot of work involved, a lot of interdepartmental work, so that easily, you make up that difference fairly quickly. So it's not a revenue generating stream, it's just something we tried to come up with that's fair.
A quick question, you mentioned other towns charge $50, or you
No.
charged 50? Or
No,
you sort
I
of-
was just like in my head, like for the solar, trying to say, okay, how many hours do I think it takes to process something? And I was just using a rough number of like $50 an hour for town services, $100 is probably more reasonable. And then sometimes like, okay, so if you have a $2,000, that's saying that's 20 hours of work at $100 an hour. That goes pretty fast. So even if you go 50, that's generous, but.
I guess my question was, did you get a sense from other towns? Is that sort of roughly what they figure, $50 an hour for?
I don't know. I didn't go into that detail. I just went to their town websites and looked at what they charge for their services. So I don't know how they calculate it. That's kind of what we came up with.
My only question, on page 1,
Yep.
resubmission of application and extension of sureties, are we removing? the-
Yeah, I realized, basically it found the last year, we really weren't following through on that, and when they come to us and then they have to revise plans, it really wasn't probably a fair assessment of to charge them again. That was part of their application fee. And then I realized extension of sureties, we don't extend sureties, they're set for a time frame, so that was kind of like learning process that those weren't necessary.
Okay, this is very helpful. So to summarize, there's a variety of fees and escrow payments through the planning board process. Most of them are unchanged. There is a $50 per lot per unit increase on preliminary plans on minor subdivisions. There is a $200 increase in the base fee for major subdivisions, master and preliminary. A $1,000 increase in a commercial development plan review, and a removal of fees for resubmission of applications, extension of sureties, and a application of a new fee for reinstatements or an amendment of a final plan. And then on the escrow schedule, there are removals of 4 escrow fundings that are essentially redundant. So I guess we'd say there's no change. This is a public hearing. Would anybody like to be heard on these suggested changes?
Could I just say, it's hard to hear anyone. I don't know if that mic is on.
Is it hard to hear the podium or us? Is
Well,
all of the above?
sometimes I can't hear you guys because you're not speaking into the mic,
Okay.
but it doesn't sound like that's on at all.
It all runs in
podium?
the same system, so
It's just hard to
you want me to
hear.
go blown?
And when you're home, it's hard to hear.
It is hard. It's hard to hear up here as well. Okay.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
It just doesn't project. It's always the same. I can never hear out there. I don't.
Well, all right, thank you. We'll speak up a little bit, at least here.
Thank you.
Second call for any questions or comments from the public. Okay, the floor is open. Any motions? Questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the amendments to fines and fees for planning board fees.
Second.
As proposed.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And is that also for the escrow fundings as well, as proposed?
Yes, all of the planning board fees.
Very well. Any other questions or comments from the council? Objections to proceeding to a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous, approved as presented. And thank you to the planning board for that work. We move on to the police department. Police chief, give us a quick introduction.
Good evening. As you can see from these proposed fines or fees, there's just been some small changes to the detail rate, which is proposed, but that's the amount that vendors who do road work or do business in town are required to hire a police officer. So that rate is determined by collective bargaining with the town, but we also charge an administrative fee and also FICA to the vendor. So that change is reflective of that. Going down the list, the use of vehicles on a detail, prior to this, it was $100 a day, which wasn't nearly enough to cover the use of the vehicle. So we took on the DOT standard, which is used by state police and many other police departments, which is the $20 an hour. Also, the VIN, or the Vehicle Identification Number inspection, and the odometer inspection, which are essentially one and the same, went up $10 respectively. And the animal boarding, we currently have a shelter with the contracted shelter with the town, and that rate would be determined by that contract. And then we get down into the parking violations. The $25 for standard parking violations did not change, but during a emergency or snow removal, it went up $25. And then the next change you will see is for handicap parking violations, which went up also $25, which is in line with what other municipalities are doing in state law.
And for clarity, the hydrant-related violation that would go to $75 is in connection with snow, and all other blocking hydrant issues would be no change at $50.
That's correct.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Any questions or comments from the public? Floor is also open from the council. I just note that the $10 to $20 is, in percentage terms, a rather big jump. You said that follows the state or federal recommend that standard for $10 to $20 at DOT, was it?
For the,
For the VIN and the odometer inspection, I just noticed.
not for the details, for the VIN and the odometer? Yes, it's actually low comparatively.
We talked about this.
A second call. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Okay, the floor is open.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the amendments to the fines and fees for the police department.
Second.
We have a live motion to approve as presented. Any other questions or comments from the council? Any objection to proceeding to a vote? Okay, all those in favor? Those passed unanimously. Thank you. I take it that had your recommendation as well, Mr. Administrator? Okay, next up is the Recreation Department. Do we have a sponsor?
I do have a question with these. I don't know if anyone could answer me. On the beach fees, it says that we're the $10 resident beach permit. Can we charge that, Tricia? Are you reading this?
Yeah.
Motion made
Well, I'm
to
a-
suggest a $10 resident beach permit. Now, I thought, because of all the work we've done, Rhode Island residents are free, including Tiverton, because of the grant.
Well,
I just want this clarified. It didn't make sense to me.
well, that's not quite true, but what I'm a little confused about is that minutes, right, which is highlighted, is in one set of backup, but it's not on the updated thing. So I'm assuming that got withdrawn, I think, yes, no?
That's what I'm wondering.
I think
And
that.
the only person who can answer that is probably Chris Romlin, who I thought was going to try to be here, but apparently didn't.
But it's not on the latest
looking at-
version.
Right, he had
Oh, this is
indicated he
new.
wanted to propose it to the town council, because I told them that just because you vote for it in your commission meeting is not enough. You need the
Right.
town council approval. So if, I don't know, this is, I think, Nancy, you put together this,
Oh, here it says non-Rhode Island residents.
Yes, the site, all of this, he had sent something, yes. That was already prepared.
When did we get this, though? This was just given to us tonight?
Yes.
All right.
So we're,
That's
so,
simply the spreadsheet that these numbers you're approving is going to go in.
But it doesn't match up to what we got previously.
No, I took
And that's why I had
those from a different
questions.
sheet that the recreation.
Because according to the new thing, it says weekday non-Rhode Island residents. But according to the minutes, it's Rhode Island, it's residents.
Originally, what they wanted to do was charge $10 for a season pass for residents.
But if
But
they're
because,
free,
but because it didn't get proposed and brought before the council ahead of time, I think that you should waive it until next year. They should look at it and reconsider next year rather than do it now. But I thought Chris was going to be here.
does someone want to explain to me, I thought the grant,
so,
maybe the language I
So-
don't understand completely.
so there's nothing in the grant that ultimately prohibits us from, if we decided to, charging Tiverton residents.
Oh, I thought there was.
No, there isn't. There's nothing in the grant. It's just that we didn't before, we didn't accept it when, we didn't do it when we accepted the grant. There's nothing that's there. There is a requirement to the grant that says that having accepted that, we can't charge other Rhode Island residents more than double what we charge Tiverton residents. And because we currently charge Tiverton residents zero doubled is
Zero.
zero.
All right.
But we can charge out-of-state residents at whatever rate we want.
Okay.
But we've never, ever charged Tiverton residents a fee to use the beaches, so that's where it comes from.
Well, that's why I didn't understand why we would charge $10 for a permit, yearly permit, when we're not charging anything daily.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, well, it seems unlikely that we're going to take any action tonight, but this was an advertised public hearing. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to be heard on the topic of recreation fees? Of any kind?
Is there anything that you're allowed to talk about with recreation, or just that?
Just the fees.
Just the fees.
Just the fees. But I will interpret that broadly if you'd like to.
We could get into.
So,
All right, so what I think we need clarity on is exactly what is the Recreation Commission recommending? Does it also have the recommendation of the town administrator?
No, he's saying no.
And is it the pleasure of the council to put this back on for another meeting?
well, may I ask one question? So I'm just going to note a couple things. Forget the season pass thing, okay? Because
That doesn't make
just
sense.
pretend that doesn't exist on this. The Grinnell's Beach fee, where it says to change that Foglan's 10, Grinnell's Beach is 5, the council voted 2 years ago to change that. So the Recreation Commission, I think, is a little off on their fees because the town council voted 2 years ago to make the fees at Grinnell's and Fogland the same amount.
Yep.
So they already are. So the thing that's at the bottom of this page here,
That's what it is.
that's all, that's not
That's how
correct.
much we're charging
Not
previously.
my, I don't know where it all comes from, so.
This is just a compilation that staff put together, so I think for purposes of this meeting, we really have to look at 6B3.
Yeah, I know, but
But
six,
to your point, we'll need better clarity if we want to bring this back up.
Right, but, okay.
Because this is what went out to hearing.
Okay. But what I'm telling you is that the fees that are here for the beach, the proposed fees, were adopted 2 years ago.
we're doing that.
They're the current fees. So they're not newly proposed, they're the actual fees that we have today on that one. And maybe we should table,
Well, this is totally wrong.
it's wrong, what I'm telling you is that it's wrong. The council voted 2 years ago Just-
council voted last year not to take the fee from Grinnell's because it was going to be closed. I have the
Right.
minutes.
No, but
because
we
it
didn't
was
change,
closed, but we didn't change
the
it.
fees. The 2 years ago, the fees at Grinnell's were adopted to be the same as Fogland.
Yep.
Yeah.
I suggest we continue.
Okay, we can work that out offline. 'cause
But
think we all
I
agree
do
with it.
have, so offline on that, but the one question I have about tabling these things is that, forgetting the beach stuff, the summer camp stuff and all of that, I don't know when these things start. So do we need to address these fees now? Because these programs actually are going to start, and if we kick this,
Well, they probably start when school ends. We have a meeting before school.
This
Do they-
says Summer
Right, we
Parks
have-
Program, July
been-
8.
They've been registering people
So how much are
already.
they charging to?
I think it was 200 for residents and 300 for non-residents for the parks
Without us
program.
approving this?
That's what it was last year.
But that's not what it looks like.
says on the
It looks
paper.
like it's an increase.
It says it's an increase.
It'll start.
See, this says it's an increase, and I don't think that's right either. I think you're right. I think we're charging
Yeah,
200.
it was 200 and
I think
300.
we approved that last year.
Right,
Yeah,
that's what it
Mr.
was.
On recreation, you can't follow this spreadsheet because. there
You
must
can't
be
follow
some
any of
minutes.
this on recreation, and
The
I
other
think,
ones were fine.
I agree with that.
yeah, I think we need to table this until the first of the June meeting and ask that someone from the recreation committee come and explain this to us.
And one thing that I just want to clarify, I'm a little confused by the way this is being done, frankly, by the Recreation Commission. I felt it was necessary to explain that no change in fees can be final until it has been approved by the town council.
Right.
And that needs to be clear. And it's not only about fees, there are some other issues in here. I'm not sure where the council is on, for example, the food truck licensing and whether or not there are fees there. I think that needs to be also explained to the council what the proposal is.
Well, we discussed this weekend with the beaches open. There's not really any real protocol for the food trucks.
There's
right?
what?
There's no real written protocol for the food trucks. Like,
Right.
for the food trucks to follow.
And that's what I had asked, is like, I think we need the protocol and the council needs to approve it.
I mean, if Nancy, if you're telling me this thing takes precedence, then they're already admitting in this document that these fees were already last year's fees.
That
Yeah.
could be because I didn't change those on there. So I didn't find the minutes to change them on there, so you're gonna have to go by what you got in the backup.
Okay.
That's what was advertised. So the box on
So do we need a motion to table? or-
Well, the first thing is the pleasure of the council to consider this matter at all this year?
Oh, yes, we have
Okay,
to.
In which
There's an
case,
increase.
we spent money to advertise this, so is it really a motion to table or to continue the public hearing? And we need to have a date certain when we do that? Okay, so
It would be the first
I
one.
just want you to work out all this admin outside of the meeting, and obviously, you have the opportunity to talk with the team, so
June 3rd or June 10th?
June 10th, okay, is that?
Yep, so I make a motion to continue this until June 10th.
Second.
Okay, and before we vote on that motion, second call from the public. Any questions or comments on the topic of recreation fees? And just so we're clear, if this motion to continue is heard, this public hearing on this matter will be continued without further advertisement until Monday, June 10th, at which time we will consider recreation fees, which might be different, perhaps, than the ones that are in the backup to this meeting. Could be different fees, could be different amounts, up or down. Okay. All right, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to continue? And this aspect of the public hearing will be continued. Okay, our next public hearing, this one is also advertised, sponsored by Chief Jones. This is a public hearing to amend our Code of Ordinances, specifically Section 78-136 of Article 5, which relates to handicap and disability parking, allowance for designation of a handicap parking spot on 8 Clement Street at the request of Rosalind R. LePage. Chief?
Good evening again. I'd received a request from a resident on Clement Street that she met all the requirements as per state law and also through the Registry of Motor Vehicles to place a second handicap parking spot on Clement Street. There is already one existing, so that would be in addition to the one that's there. I'd work with the solicitor's office about just adding the designation of 8 Clement to include 23 Clement, so in the event that there was a parking violation there, that we could enforce it.
Is there any backup to this? Because I don't think I
There-
received any.
I believe I had submitted some the last meeting.
No, none of us have it, I don't think.
You don't have
No.
this with the handicap?
Nope.
You don't, do you have the agenda request?
Nope.
Put it in the back.
Can I just take a quick peek at it?
Sure.
Yeah, I like to see the street and where we're putting it. It wasn't your fault, I was ready to blame you, you know. No, only kidding.
Have you ever seen any of these rescinded over time?
No, sir.
But that's a theoretical possibility if the second spot might not be needed.
Correct.
Is that a process that you or your team could initiate? Or is
Yes.
it-
We would actually do this process, sir, in reverse. To
But
amend the
this one
moment.
came at the request.
Exactly.
But if I collected 50 spots and then.
Correct,
Well, if
correct.
somebody moved and there's no longer need for the handicap spot.
Or someone passed away, correct.
Right, because we've done that.
Yes.
Mr. Davis, you good on legal ones?
Yeah.
I'm just curious to.
Could you just turn the microphone off? Thank you.
We're just checking the paperwork. This is a public hearing. Would anybody from the public like to be heard? Questions, comments, or any statements at all on this additional handicap parking spot at 8 Clement Street? Sir?
I would think the next question you would ask is how many handicapped people are on Clement Street?
Probably one house, right?
Two.
Two.
Just two?
Well, I would assume if they're asking for another one, that they need to.
One at 8 and one at 23.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, hearing no other questions or comments, the floor is open.
I'll move to approve the amended Code of Ordinances, Section 78136, Article 5, Handicap and Disability Parking, allowing for designation of handicap parking spot on 8 Clement Street at the request of Rosalind R. LePage.
Second.
We have a live motion. Are there any questions or comments? Any objection to proceeding directly to a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor? Approved as requested. Thank you. We will now put on our Board of Licensing hat. This is a request for approval of a holiday license. Susan Boulay, SAA, doing business as Riverside Marina, LLC, 211 Riverside Drive. Would anybody like to be heard on this matter? This is item 8A in your backup. I'm thinking technically the business name is the LLC and the DBA is the other one. That's
Marina.
illuminated the holiday licensing. Town of Tiverton Council has illuminated the holiday license.
Eliminated.
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 But it's spelled with an I.
My allergies, I can't see.
No, it's spelled with an I. so
Okay.
Eliminated or illuminated?
Oh, so there's no fee.
It's eliminated. Means you get rid of it and you put lights around it.
Excuse me? You
No.
gotta get a license to put
Has
lights around
eliminated.
something. What,
Holiday,
what's
so
this
zero.
for?
What is it for?
Holiday
Yeah,
license.
is the applicant here?
Do we know if this has been approved in the past?
Isn't it just to
It's
be,
been approved.
yeah,
Every year?
This is actually a late.
yeah.
And late one that didn't come in
And
November.
there's no fee for a holiday license.
Right.
The
So,
town council.
I'll make a motion to approve a holiday license for SAA DBA as Riverside Marina LLC, 21 Riverside Drive, subject to meeting all legal requirements.
Second,
Just to correct though, 211.
What should say?
21.
Oh, sorry, 211.
Is there a discussion?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure what this license is for.
Neither am I.
It's to be open.
On
What's to be open?
On holidays.
Yeah, to be open on holidays.
Marina.
The
To
marina.
operate on a holiday.
Right, that's what it means, holiday license to operate on a holiday. So
It's
the
an
marina
existing
wants-
marina?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
Is it, and by that we mean all holidays?
yes.
Yep.
The state requires
A lot
that
of-
we issue holiday licenses.
A lot of establishments in town
Council,
have.
prior council voted not to charge for it. So it's the old Sunday licenses.
Usually they all get done in one big block in November.
Take the boat out on Christmas?
Don't be
Mostly for
smart.
Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day.
He knows that, Joe.
But if you want to go on Christmas,
Hey,
Santa,
there's
take
the
Santa,
bear plunge, right?
take Santa for, yeah, take Santa
If it's
for a cruise.
illuminated, it'll be fine.
Okay, last call for questions or comments? All those in favor? Okay, approved as presented, thank you. Our
I
next
have a
one
question about this one.
is William Patello, The Cheese Wheel Village Market, 3838 Main Road. This is a special event, not victualling, right?
Antique.
A special event.
So it's an
Antique car show.
antique.
Old cars and cheese.
Are they gonna do this in their parking lot? Or, oh no, wait a minute. Four Corners, I got you.
Well, there's a map on
This
that.
Yeah, there
would
is a
be
map.
On,
There's a map.
It looks like it's in their parking lot.
June 15th?
It does, doesn't it?
Yep.
Is it in their parking lot? Because it looks like that in the map.
Said he had parking,
But that's a small parking lot, I was just wondering.
because this already went through the police department and all, I don't know if it's in there.
Chief Jones?
And
Make a motion.
I don't,
And I'm assuming that because the advertisement says 10 to 4, there aren't hours on the application, but is that what time it is, from 10 to 4?
Do you have any issues with parking at this special event?
I do not.
it's fine, okay. Is there anyone here from the Cheese Wheel? Oh, perfect.
Yeah, here's your chance to get some free advertising, so never miss that opportunity.
See when-
Are you Mr. Patel?
How you doing?
So it's 10 to 4.
It's going to be 12 to 4.
12 to
12
Yeah.
to 4.
And it'll be
Yeah.
in your parking lot.
There will be some in my parking lot, and there'll be some along Main Road in each of the businesses' parking lots
Oh,
also.
okay.
So we're going to kind of spread it out amongst the Four Corners Village.
How many do you expect?
25 to 30 cars.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
They
we-
range from early 1900s to 1940.
Yeah, these are money.
So
Oh, by antique, you mean really?
they're really antique. There's nothing like the
Volkswagen's not gonna pass.
67 Bug won't cut it.
Can people drive them?
Now they look at them.
Yeah,
They used to have something
no muscle cars.
similar to-
Maybe next year.
Do you have, since you're going to use the parking lots, which sort of makes sense, because then you would see the cars on display.
Right.
Do you have a plan for the parking for the people who are coming to the event?
Yes, there's,
It's right over here at Cutie Curls and Courtyard, right?
yeah, there's some there, and there's some
Okay.
in my parking lot,
Okay.
and there's some behind the Gallery 4, which is a pretty large parking lot also.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the Cheese Wheel Village Market, 3838 Main Road, Tiverton, special event permit for an antique car show, 12 to 4 on June 15th. Oop, can we change that to June 30th? Saturday, June 30th. Sorry, guys.
Is that okay to change that, Dan? Yeah, because it wasn't advertised as June 30th.
Changing.
It wasn't advertised as June 30th, I just was curious.
So we.
It's okay.
No.
We do the same thing we did with the,
Nate Becker says it doesn't have to be.
four-year walk
The
store on
deal.
Jennifer.
I'll second it.
So it's June 30th.
12 to 4, June 30th, Tiverton Four Corners.
Sorry, did I miss the second?
Second.
Any questions or comments from the public? June 30th, not June 15th. Any call-in? Anybody calling in for the?
Make reservations.
All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll probably put this on the agenda just to clean up the typo. You don't have to come back.
Okay,
It's on the
great.
consent agenda, sale
Do you
rep.
need the signatures of the properties
We only need
owners?
3 samples, is all we need.
No.
Okay.
What is that?
This is just a release for
Send that
the,
into the clerk's office.
send it in the clerk's office? Okay. Okay.
Hand them to me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, why don't you just give them to Nancy now?
Get this printed.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, we are still in Board of Licensing mode. Kimberly Conterio and Ashley Nittini, apologies, Operations Director from the Providence Roller Derby, requesting a one-day Class F beer and wine liquor license on June 22nd from 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. and June 23rd from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Longplex. Longplex is on 300 Industrial Way. Would anybody like to be heard on this request?
Providence Roller Derby?
Getting a lot of mic time tonight. I just want to bring to the council's attention, and I've received it from the clerk, and I've reached out to some of the organizers, and as of this date, I have not heard back yet. But there are certain requirements under the ordinance to issue the one-day licensing, to include liability insurance, tips training of the people that will be distributing alcohol, also a signed, and I would prefer notarized copy from Mr. Long, who's the owner of the Longplex, absolving the town of all liability. And there's also a provision under the ordinance that says they're anticipating per the application 300 people. For every 100 people that will be in attendance, they need to hire a police officer. So I just want to make sure that the council's aware of those requirements in the ordinance before passage of this permit.
Should we table it, considering that you don't really have any details on this?
I have not heard from them. And I will also note, just for the record, per the ordinance as well, it's got to be submitted to the clerk's office at least 45 days before the event, and they're not 45 days.
No.
What is it, June 22nd is less than a month out?
They submitted it on May 23rd for the 22nd and 23rd of June, so it was 30 days.
Okay, well, I assume all the other items, that's part of the subject of legal requirements, if we wanted. I don't know if we can waive, it's an ordinance. I don't have them all memorized, but there's an ordinance, 45 days.
That's
It's
what
up.
the clerk's
Is that
office
waivable?
to prepare, and I think it's not.
It's not 45 days,
I
Nancy?
mean, if we couldn't get this prepared in time.
Microphone.
If we couldn't get this prepared in time, that would be a bigger issue. But I think the chief addresses some concerns.
Yeah, I'm
But the
hesitant to
45-day
approve
one-
this if-
Given that I haven't heard anything back from these folks and they're late in their application, I mean, that would be up to the clerk and yourselves as the authorizing body. I'm more concerned about the liability insurance, and they're serving alcohol, and the waiver of liability to the town, and also the presence of police officers there.
May I ask one other question, too? On a Class F liquor license, is there any restriction on the time or the hours? I mean, because this is to serve till 1 a.m. one night.
Correct.
Is there, Nancy? I don't know the answer. On a Class F liquor license, on a one day, is there any restriction on the hours?
They're asking for it to 1 in the morning, aren't they?
That-
Yeah, because one of these days is till 1 in the
Well,
morning.
this is a 2-day event. really.
And that's standard in town for your other licensed liquor establishments is 1 a.m.
Okay.
No, I know that, but Nancy said she's all right with leaving, I don't know.
How long ago did you reach out to them?
I received it from the clerk, I believe it was a day or two after, I can tell you right now. I believe it
So
was
it's just- it
last
came in
Thursday,
a few
so
days ago.
it's almost, I'd say five days with the holiday, to be
Holiday
fair.
weekend.
Did you try again today?
I did not.
This is a new business, so they may not be completely up on our deadlines.
Does it have anything to do with Longplex, though? It looks like.
It does. That's where the event is going to be held.
Longplex, but
Correct.
it's not him that's
That is correct.
doing it.
Correct.
It's someone that's maybe renting the building to do it.
They're sponsoring it, correct.
Okay.
But I haven't heard from Mr. Long either.
Does anybody wish to be heard from the public on this? Probably ask you to go to the podium.
Oh, do I?
Well, just because of the microphones or, thank you.
Ray Fougere, Tiverton resident. The town of Tiverton, through its writings, promotes itself as being business-friendly. And I would think that if you wanted to be business-friendly, you would approve that motion. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Yeah?
Speaking from the economic development, Barbara Pelletier, speaking from the Economic Development Commission, and we were at that walkabout on, you were there, and I think he's trying to do a good job. I think we should give him all the benefit of the doubt and just forge ahead.
Chief Jones, what do you suggest we do? Do we approve it meeting all your legal requirements, and if you're satisfied, then it goes on?
At the very least. I would say that the ordinance is there for a reason. It's my job to inform you that the ordinance and the laws are there. And any applicant, it's not about being business-friendly or not. It's about obeying the current ordinances and the laws. And it's about, they're there for everyone to obey. And if these people bring in and Mr. Long works with me, I'd have absolutely no objection with them meeting all the legal requirements.
So, if you could list, you want to receive some notification of the tip certification, the liability insurance and waiver.
Indemnity?
So the first, and I'm referencing, it's actually section 6-52, conditions for issuance. And number one is petitioners will provide $2 million general liability and liquor liability insurance for the event with the town named as an additional loss insured. Number two is the applicant, if an individual or the responsible party, which this applicant is, shall have a check of criminal convictions and driving record for any alcohol violations. Number three, if the applicant is the owner of the premises or is not, they must receive landowner or business owner permission. The applicant must provide proof that the individuals serving alcohol, which I believe are listed in the application, there are 3, have received the TIPS training so they can dispense alcohol. And finally, that the applicant must receive approval from the police department, specifically myself, that if they plan on having more than 100 people, it's a police officer per 100, and based on their application, they're anticipating 3. I did ask the question of the applicant in an email if they are planning, because it's a 2-day event, is it a total of 300 people over 2 days? And obviously, that would cut the cost and the need for a police officer in half. But to this date, I have not received a response.
So I'm sorry. Oh, sir.
If I may, I do agree with the comments that we should try to support the new business. On the other hand, I also think this can set a precedent, and we might as well take advantage of the opportunity to make it clear to Mr. Long that when he enters into these kinds of arrangements, he should be informing the people that he has an arrangement with of the requirements. And that will prevent a lot of this kind of confusion in the future. I will talk to Mr. Long myself. I just would like to make sure I get the conditions that you enumerated and also convey them to him.
Yes,
so
sir.
that he's aware of it.
So, may I ask a question? So, the 45 days is waivable, is that correct?
That's an ordinance and a council prerogative, not mine.
Well, it's an ordinance.
Yeah.
But
Right.
is
But
it?
I think they set that 45 days because some people come in and think you're going to get this the very next day, or I'm going to be able to hand you a permit or a
Right.
license. I can't do that. I think the 45 days is set to get all the paperwork and everything in order.
And to come in front
You
of
can hear
us,
the chief
too.
is trying to get some of this stuff and not able to
Right.
get it. But as far as the 45 days, it's not on my part. If they can get the TIPS training, if if you have that rule, if they get that and the insurance and everything, I
Detail.
mean, I'm only going to issue the license upon your approval, but the chief has to make sure that they met some of those legal requirements.
So, you know, I agree with what Jan had to say about not setting precedents here and creating situations where we're approving stuff and we don't have everything that we're supposed to have to approve it. Then the burden is on the clerk and/or the police chief to make sure everybody gets things. And I actually think that doing it that way is the opposite of being business friendly. I think that's how we get into trouble, because people think, well, I have an approval, and then, you know, they're going to have all this stuff before, and then it doesn't happen, and then at the 11th hour, we have to put our foot down because they didn't get everything in. So I think it's actually the opposite of being business friendly. But if the solicitor says that the 45-day period is waivable, I would be willing to say that if the applicant understands before the next meeting that they need to produce everything on the list that Chief Jones said they had to have, and could come back by then with everything that they have to have, that, you know, I would be willing to do it if the solicitor says the ordinance is waivable, which I don't know the answer to.
Mr. President? So, ordinance section 6-51 does specify that applications for such licenses must be filed with the town clerk no less than 45 days prior to the proposed event. The language appears mandatory, and unless there's some other provision within the ordinances that allows the council to waive timeframes or some other portion of the charter that would authorize that, I don't believe the council has the authority to waive that provision.
Are we aware of waiving anything in the past?
I don't remember
No.
ever waiving them.
I would also say, though, that the council should not be concerned about precedent, right? Each application comes on its own merits.
Yeah.
So the precedential concern is not one that should factor into the council's consideration, other than from a legal standpoint,
Not from a legal standpoint.
other than from a prudential standpoint.
Right.
I would say, because this is a new business in the industrial park, and I imagine it's somewhat rare to have 300 people at events in Tiverton, we could give on that and then have it still send the necessary signal that this is not meant to be a practice. And so I'm sympathetic to the application, but I don't know how to get around this ordinance.
I don't think we
President,
can waive this, though, can we?
Unless some of you can tell me that we've
I don't.
followed it in the past.
I would be concerned with the liability to the town if something were to happen. We would be liable. That's what I would be
We'll solve that
concerned.
problem for sure. I think we're
Well,
all
that would
agreed
be
on that.
the most important thing, I think.
I don't
Mr.
know.
President, if the council was inclined to accept the petition, to approve the petition, then certainly all the remaining requirements should be covered under the legal requirements, right? Including indemnity, including an additional named insured, including any of the requirements to hire additional police officers as required by the ordinance. So those should all include a checkoff either by the clerk or chief of police, and ideally both. And to the extent that there's any concern about the language of the indemnification, you know, that should be forwarded to the town solicitor's office as well.
That would definitely be-
But even at that, the
But-
original application doesn't make the 45 days.
That's
I mean,
the problem.
This doesn't
So,
make the 45 days.
you know, I can certainly do a review of the ordinances to see if there's some provision that we're overlooking that would allow the council to authorize it if you push it over to the June 10th meeting. But otherwise, I don't believe the council has the authority to authorize it under
So
your
we've
ordinances.
had a problem before.
So,
People please speak into the mics. You can't even hear them.
So the process for amending an ordinance is lengthy.
Yeah, we'd have to do a new ordinance.
But what I'm wondering is if we could do a waiver sort of in the form of an ordinance by the next meeting and keep everything going. And
No,
that
because
way-
it has to be advertised and all of that. Yeah.
time.
I was just thinking of that, but that has to be advertised for so many days and,
Certainly something to look at, though.
No.
10 days.
Nancy, is there any other type of liquor license application that has less than a 45-day application period?
It's just a liquor license.
I only know this on the F1.
Right, for the one day.
That's the only one that.
So the worst case scenario, they can have the event, it just can't have liquor.
Correct.
Well, let me ask.
could be a word.
Let me ask.
We're not
let me-
shutting it down.
Hang on one second.
Correct.
Let me ask a question, though. This is why I'm asking this. If they had a caterer, if this was a special event and they had a caterer do it, could they get that?
If the caterer has a liquor
If the
license.
caterer
Have a liquor license.
In
Right.
other words, if they hired a caterer that has a liquor license, they
Yeah.
could do that in less than 45 days. That's,
Yes.
I'm trying to find if there's a way that they could, so they could hire a caterer that has a liquor
That
license.
serves the liquor.
I mean, and I'm sort of wondering just myself, though, why they wouldn't be doing that. If you're going to have 300 people at an event and you're going to serve alcohol, wouldn't you want to have a caterer with trained tip servers and liability insurance and a license to handle the alcohol anyway?
The application does indicate that they're going to do that.
Microphones, please.
We're doing the best we can.
If you look at
Maybe
the
if
back
move-
page of the application, it does indicate they'll only have tip certified servers. It does indicate that they have property insurance and liquor liability
Right, but it-
insurance. It just doesn't indicate that the town is an additional insured on those policies. So that's the verification work that would need to be done.
It doesn't have the other things. Well, I mean, maybe we should suggest to them that if they were to engage a caterer with a liquor license, that would, and then would they still have to come to us for a special event permit, or no?
No, because they don't need the liquor
Really, because
license.
this is being held in the
In a building.
Longplex count.
Right.
And
So they wouldn't need anything else?
Okay, so summing up here, here's what I think we have. I haven't heard anybody from the public wish to speak to this. The applicant nor the landowner is present. I don't see this council taking a vote to approve this tonight, but I do think, unless I hear an objection, there's a consensus among the council that we support this in concept. If it's less than 45 days tonight on May 29th, or 28th, I apologize, then it will also be less than 45 days on June 10th. So if perhaps by June 10th, if this happens to come back up, if it can clear legal and find a way that, I don't know if the council has inherent authority to waive this ordinance, since it is, I presume, for the protection of the town and the public. I don't know. We're going to need legal on that. And obviously, if the applicant would probably be well advised to satisfy all of the requirements, and then if there's a solution, and perhaps there's a workaround through hiring a caterer or some other.
Other
that would be
businesses
the-
do that. They hire a caterer.
But I don't think at this time, I have the comfort that we're within our authority to proceed. Speaking for myself only because of that ordinance, which seems to be mandatory, as the solicitor stated. Without any objection, I'm going to proceed on the agenda.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to appointments of resignations. First, we have acknowledgement of a resignation from Mr. David E. Bell, Jr. from the Historical Cemeteries Commission. And I'm sure we would all like to express our appreciation for his service to the town. How about a formal motion to do just that?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to accept with regret the resignation of David E. Bell from the Historical Cemeteries Commission and thank him for his service.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you again. We now have an appointment. We have two vacancies expiring on April 15th of 2022 on the Open Space and Land Preservation Commission. And we have a request for a reappointment from Mr. Gary Plunkett, who is a longtime servant on that board and commission. Given that it is a reappointment and we have more vacancies than applicants, I'm hoping we can proceed directly to the reappointment. But the floor is open.
Mr. President, do we need a motion to proceed to the vote, or can we just?
I think, I'll ask Mr. Favish, but I think the agenda
No, I
says
meant.
request for reappointment.
No, I meant on
Make
our
a motion, we
policy. A
reappoint
motion to, that we
Mr. Plunkett.
go directly to the appointment without waiting the normal one meeting period because it's a reappointment.
Leave it in the motion, right?
Okay.
Either way.
In
yeah.
that case,
Unless it's a contested motion, I think we'll.
I don't think anybody will. So I'll make a motion to reappoint Gary Plunkett to the Open Space and Land Preservation Commission to a term to expire 4/15/2020.
Second,
2020 or 20?
2022.
2022.
Thinking of the.
And
I'm really dyslexic tonight.
Mr. Plunkett has, in addition to the time on our Conservation Commission and our Planning Board, 25 years. 25 years. Is that a record? I don't, that might be an interesting. All those in favor?
I'll abstain.
Okay, we are now moving on to general business. And we have Mr. Michael Roderick, Courtney Roderick Run for Recovery. I think we had an approval on this maybe at the last meeting. This is a particular item requesting an extended timeline for displaying signs on the public grounds for the Courtney Roderick Run for Recovery, a nonprofit event to be held on July 20th, 2019.
And this is according to the sign ordinance, Nancy, it has to be up for how many?
This is through zoning.
Zoning.
And zoning states you cannot have signs on town property. And if it's a nonprofit, as this is, even to put the signs up on private, it would have to be with them, with the zoning permit acknowledging, and it can't be more than 14 days prior to the event.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Mr. President?
If we could just get a quick introduction of what we're looking for, and
Sure.
then I'll turn it right over.
So did you say even private property? We can't put them up for over 14 days? Did I hear you say that? Private property?
It's right here.
Oh, okay, I thought she said private. So, thanks for having me back again. Appreciate the time to talk to you about this. So the issue, as Nancy said, for our event is the placing of signs in grassy public areas, primarily around the town, around the course, which we did last year, way in advance. And it's not the only form we use. We have flyers that we put up in private businesses. We have, we did TV, billboards, but we also do signs, because every little bit helps to get the word out. And I think every situation is different, okay? And I know, there are exceptions to rules. And the thing about this event, it's fighting an epidemic where 50,000 people have died from opioid addiction, 50,000, more than the Vietnam War. And I bet you if I look out in this audience right now, I don't know, there's probably 50 people. I bet you somebody directly or indirectly or somebody else has been touched by the opioid addiction. I'm sure of it. You can raise your hands. Well, they have. So it touches everybody. And this is our second run that we're doing. Last year, we raised $10,000, and we want to double the runners. We've already talked to the chief. We've already gone through all the steps we have to do to get our permit. But the other thing that was brought up to me by somebody in this audience right now, it's just as important. We're trying to, we're doing a thing not only for our organization, Courtney Roderick Run for Recovery, but we're doing it as a town type thing. We're bringing the town together to do a good cause, and I think it's fostering camaraderie amongst the town businesses, sponsors, people in the town, all the organizations. And we've seen that from last year to this year. We've seen, we have more sponsors this year. We've seen more interest. And I think that's what it does. It brings together, a good town fabric and bring us all together for a common purpose. So we're just looking, instead of waiting the 14 days, whatever the ordinance says, is to do it, start doing it now. because it helps us to get the word out. And like I said, there's two reasons for doing it, for our organization and also to bring everyone together for a common purpose.
Okay, so it's a good cause, we all agree. We have our ordinances. Councilor Hilton.
So, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, and I actually feel a little sorry that Mr. Roderick somehow wasn't informed of this before he asked to be on the agenda, but...
These are the signs, by the way, too. That we're talking about.
I've
But-
seen them.
We're going to get you advertising to do
Yeah,
nothing else, so that's for sure.
But this is zoning code. It's a zoning ordinance. And as a council, we have zero authority whatsoever to grant any exceptions or variances from the zoning code. There is a way to do that, but you have to do that through the zoning board, not through the council. And I feel kind of badly that at some point in preparing this, somebody didn't let Mr. Roderick know that the place that he would need to go to appeal this is the zoning board, because it's a part of the zoning code and we
have no
can't do
jurisdiction.
anything about that.
Do we all agree what the problem is? We're talking about public lands only, public, as in the town of Tiverton.
Right.
So not,
No, well, it's also private, it is also
says private
private
too, though,
property too.
private is
That's
between
news to me.
Private owners, right?
So there are two different
I didn't
issues here.
understand.
Actually, there's several different issues here. The first issue comes with respect to the overall power of the town to regulate signs, right? Signs, municipalities generally have the authority to regulate signs, but those limitations are restricted to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. I'm trying to do the best I can. The ability of a municipality to regulate signs is limited to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. So there may or may not be a question about whether this particular zoning ordinance's restrictions are in fact reasonable in light of these circumstances. That issue aside, the ordinance says 2 14-day periods. It does not say that the 14-day periods can't be consecutive. Right, so if the council felt as though they wanted to, they could authorize the placement of these signs on public land, and that is something that the council would have authority to do, just with respect to the authorization to place on public property, right, the property that's within the jurisdiction of the town. As for placement of these signs on private property, the same temporal restriction would apply, but it's the owner of the property that gets to authorize whether or not you place the signs there. Okay.
So, can I answer the question? Or
Just one quick
All right.
follow-up question, and then back to you. On the private property, just be very brief, because I'll take your word for it, but are there any is it even appropriate for the town to regulate sign placement on a private property for something like this? Or is it because it's not a First Amendment issue, because it's a quasi-commercial event? Is that the...
Well, so keep in mind that the First Amendment still applies to commercial activity, right?
Yeah.
The town does have authority to regulate it, but again, that authority is limited to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. Okay.
Thank you.
So just to understand what you said, so the town council can authorize two back-to-back, two 14-day periods?
I believe consistent with the ordinance,
Yeah.
the council
Yeah.
could authorize
And I was
placement on
reading
public
this and I
land
was.
Okay.
for two
wondering.
14-day
Well,
periods back to back.
that'd be great.
So that's 28 days.
Yeah, that would be, so our run's going on, it'd be on just around the 20th of June or something like
We
that.
could put a
Just-
gap in there too, right?
Take them down
If
for a
you want to
day.
get...
Oh, that would be hard.
Early.
Well, I'm not going to make a comment, but maybe that gap could be
No,
overlooked,
it
but
doesn't
whatever.
need a gap.
Yeah.
Question of whether we could even track it.
Yeah, we could cover them up for 2 days or whatever. you
So
know.
what you're saying is he doesn't have to go to the zoning board
For 28 days.
for 28 days.
For 28 days.
Correct.
Yeah, because the way I read it, I saw that too, within a 1 year period, he can do it for 14 days.
So, well, just one more question. So, that's great. So for next year, for looking forward, is it that complicated to get something like this, like 90 days? To go through zoning and get a 90-day thing, is that hard to do?
These are the folks you need to talk to. If they're interested in amending the ordinance, they can do it. If you're interested in a variance from the zoning ordinance. But, variances have specific requirements that have to be met. Okay? So My advice to you would be to talk to your council and see
Yeah.
if they're interested in amending the ordinance.
Okay.
And if not, then to seek advice about obtaining a variance.
Okay, all right.
But for now, 28 days gets you,
Yeah.
Gets me a lot more.
No zoning.
Yeah.
Gets me,
For
that's,
28 days.
that's something.
14 plus
But-
14.
Just keep in mind, even if the council takes action tonight, you do need to go see the zoning official to get a permit to attach to the signs.
Okay.
So that'll
Thank you.
prevent zoning enforcement.
All right.
Every single one?
We've never
Can we
done
just,
that.
yeah, all right.
We've never done that.
All right.
Okay.
So,
All right.
and so you're willing to have them up for 28 days before the event,
Yeah,
and that's okay?
I mean, that's a start, and then we'll work on next year and next year.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
They've been up anyway, so people have seen them.
yeah.
Yeah.
so,
Sir, how many signs do you have, Bob?
Well, right now, there's probably 10 inside the zoning office. I haven't been in there recently,
But I mean, how many signs do you have?
So, I mean, there was 10 taken down. I mean, I'd like to put those 10 back up. I
Do you
can't give
only
you,
have 10?
No, I
Or do you
can't
have
give-
20, or do you have,
well, I was gonna put more up around the town, so maybe 20, spread around the town. I don't,
so.
yeah, I don't.
Ordinance
They're
is.
like this. I mean, we had them along, you know, different places, Grinnell's, along grassy areas along the course, and in other places where, you know, they're public.
So that
You know, that
unfortunately
gets a lot
does
of
create a
highlight.
legal issue, because the ordinance only allows the council to authorize 2 signs
Oh, well,
on public.
that ain't gonna work.
But can you place
But-
the rest on private property in the same window?
Vehicles and right around town?
Under the strict terms of the ordinance, no. Again, keep in mind that restrictions need to be reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions.
Right.
Can you put them on a vehicle and ride around town?
Yes.
As many as you want, right?
Yes.
So we're gonna all put them on our cars for you.
That's what I was trying to say before. I think for what Mr. Roderick wants, that the only place he could get relief from this is to go to the zoning board.
If you-
And
There's other signs out.
And let me, and I'm very sympathetic to Mr. Roderick's event, but part of the reason for this is so that the town doesn't become awash in yard signs, right? Because we have a lot of special events and a lot of not-profit events. So the reason there's some restrictions or some guidelines on this is not to be difficult, it's just so that we don't end up with just, signs every place, which some people don't particularly like. They think it just doesn't look good to have a bazillion signs stuck in the ground all over the place. But,
So,
But other events have had more than 2 signs, Nancy.
right, that's.
I mean-
but you
it's
could,
a- it's
you
a
could
zone-
stick them on vehicles and park vehicles all over town
Yeah, but we're
on
not-
public streets, and that'd be
The
okay.
other
You can
problem
absolutely do that.
is most people just blow off this ordinance, and here
Right,
we have a
just do
gentleman
it
that actually
anyway.
does the right
Right,
thing.
the right
comes
way. It's
here,
always that
and
way.
I'm trying to find a solution.
Well, your signs were taken down, is that correct? Is that the reason why
The
you're
zoning
here?
Well, that's part of it. I'd like to put
These
them
signs
back
are
up.
taken
That's
down.
part of it.
Rhode Island DOT, for example, will have these signs put up, they'll collect them, you can go get them, and then put them back up.
And
It's
they'll
a cycle.
Take them down again. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the way the process generally plays out across the state.
Yeah, I just want to add, and I too am very sympathetic to the event. I'm also sympathetic to our zoning official, who has an obligation to enforce. And it's not so much enforcing against you specifically or this event specifically, it's enforcing against a whole bunch of signs all over town, including Rent-A-Sun and whatever. And it's a little bit out of control, or maybe very much out of control. And he's finally doing something about it, and it needs to be done. So whatever the council decides tonight, should also recognize that we're finally trying to get a little serious about, taking our own ordinance seriously. And, for example, when you say next year you want to do 90 days, I would seriously reconsider that, because I don't think that's fair. Because if you can do it, then why not the next person? And I agree that your event and your cause is very unique, but you also need to think about what it means to other people and why they all of a sudden will not be able to do what the council lets you do. So let's try to be, somewhat reasonable and strike a compromise.
Well, I mean, I said 90 days. I mean, if we needed to, I don't know what a reasonable, well,
gonna happen.
what a reasonable timeframe is. I think longer than 14 days.
Question.
Maybe we won't need
Question.
to put them out if
Could,
we've had a lot of support from all the
We'll
restaurants.
put you on TV
and-
every
que-
meeting.
question I have.
Every meeting.
Could they
We
make
won't
up,
need 'em.
could they make
So
up
what is that?
flyers? Could they make up flyers and hand them out at the local markets to people? Is that okay to do?
Subject to the market's approval.
Right, okay.
But,
I mean, there's got to be a way of getting the word out to help them
so what can we do for
with their
them
cause.
tonight?
So I think it looks like we're boxed in. I think we're going to approve 2 signs. They can be pretty large, right? 20 square feet maximum. And it looks like
Go to zoning.
get together with the team, and if there's a workaround, we'll put it right back on. I'll sponsor, we'll put it on, but it looks like we're boxed in again on this ordinance.
But-
And I don't know how fast the zoning board can move on a variance. That's a whole other ballgame. I mean,
You
that's-
keep in mind there are specific and detailed requirements for issuance of a variance.
what kind of variance would this even be?
In theory, it would be a dimensional variance.
Would be.
We're the appropriate public authority, right? To
It
give
would
them
either be a
permission
dimensional or
to put them
special,
on
yeah.
public. So we can give them permission to put 2 on public property. And we can also note that I'm not sure the zoning official will be traipsing around on private property, taking signs off people's yards, but that's,
You could also give them an approval subject to any variances required by the zoning department, so that if the zoning department or the zoning board decides to approve 10 variances, let's say, they wouldn't have to come back here to get authorization to place the additional 8 on public property.
So what you're saying is even 14 days prior, you can't put a whole bunch of signs around?
No.
Wow, and people are doing that all, I think we need to work on this then. I think we need to change this because
But there's no
that's kind of
problem on
unreasonable.
private property.
but I don't see any other penalties associated with this. It's just, your
They
sign
just
gets
take them
collected and
down.
you
Yeah.
have to go get it, so.
You can put
Do
it,
it at your own risk. You'll lose the signs, But, well, I mean, if it's only 2, we'll put 2 at Grinnell's Beach, but.
Okay, I think we have, the plan is going to be something like this. I think we're going to approve
2 for
2
20 days.
or as many as legally can be approved for the discretion of the zoning department, the building department, or the zoning board. And if you find another workaround, bring it back. And I don't think that will be part of the vote, but I'm guessing the consensus of the council is that in the administrative discretion of our zoning official as prioritizes his daily tasks, to bear in mind how this ordinance has been enforced in the past, while the council has expressed a willingness to revisit this. And I think that's about the best we can do.
I understand. I appreciate you trying to help out.
So who should revisit this? Should it be zoning that proposes a change in this far as, could we ask
You can
zoning?
develop a change in the ordinances
We can develop a change
It
in
takes the
this.
2 hearings and the,
At some point,
Be the
maybe we
ordinance
need to
amendment
look at
process.
this.
As the town is looking at its zoning ordinances generally, this is certainly one of the areas.
So, just if we're going to be consistent about this, so you'd like to have 2 signs and you'd like to have them at Grinnell's Beach?
If we only get 2,
Would it
yeah.
be those signs that you have there?
Yeah.
I mean, I think
I
in
mean-
fairness, if we're going to do this, we should know what we're approving. Not that you're going to do this, but, if you said you wanted 2 20-square-foot signs, I might say, hold on a second, So I just want to make sure we know
Yeah.
what we're approving. So 2 of the signs that you've
2 of
had before is what you'd like to
Yeah.
have.
I think you should put one here and one at Grinnell's, up here at Town Hall.
We'll do that then. Sure.
Because people will be coming in to pay taxes
Yeah,
before this, right?
yeah. We'll do that.
Or let me ask you a question. It doesn't have to be in a specific place, right?
The ordinance does not.
So,
can move it around.
so in theory, If you wanted to put it in places where there were more people at any given time, you could do that too, right? So if it was going to
Could change it around.
If it was busy at Town Farm and you wanted to put it, you could
Mix
move
it
it
up.
around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the only thing I do say is we should enforce this with everybody. It's not fair just for this event. Because there's other events that, you know, I don't agree with this ordinance, but it's not fair that Mr. Rogers has to follow this and other people aren't.
I think the point is, though, that the zoning official is actually.
Is just taking it down.
No, he's just doing this. It's not just Mr. Roderick who he's enforcing this on.
Oh, no, I know. It's just Mr. Rogers in front of us, but he needs
Right.
to understand that this isn't just,
No, it's not just Mr. Roderick.
Well, I'd like to move to approve 2 yard signs placed at Mr. Roderick's discretion in a 28-day period leading up to his event on July 20th, 2019.
Second.
Yeah, July 20th.
Do you want to pick up the savings language in case?
Go on.
Do we need, if the zoning official or the zoning board moves faster and they come back for more than 2,
Okay, with
is that something we pick up
with
on
additional
June 10th,
permission to
or
place signs as allowed by the zoning variance.
Second.
to the extent required? Okay.
That's
All right, we have a live motion, a second. Questions or comments, further questions from the public?
Do you have a comment on this? Oh, go right ahead. No, go right ahead.
Bill McLaughlin, Fish Road here in Tiverton. And I think it's great we got a building inspector who's doing his job. And nobody wants to see 100 "We Buy Crappy Houses" signs put up all over town. But I think you really should look at seriously changing this ordinance. Events like Mr. Roderick's is doing here are some of the kind of events that bring the community together, and not all you hear about everybody talking about the divisiveness going on here. And 14 days is in no way long enough for an event where you're trying to get as many people as you can to this event, and for people to plan it into their schedule and their life and everything else. 14 days is a ridiculously short amount of time to put out that kind of advertising. I would consider something where you might restrict the number of signs for this purpose, but I think in charity events, there should be an ordinance to cover that, as opposed to, like I said, "We Buy Crappy Houses" or power washing or whatever. Just something to consider.
I want to, first of all, say I hope you have a really successful event, and I think that your family, the Roderick family, has actually done this town a service in bringing this forward, because for years this town has had a sign problem. And I know I've come before Mr. Reitzma, other town councilors, town administrators, as a member of the Litter Committee and the Conservation Commission, trying to rein in the illegal placement of signs in this town on the metal wickets. And this is for-profit businesses. They tack them up on telephone poles. So I hope this is going to be the beginning of better enforcement of signs, maybe a redo of the town code to accommodate charities. But thank you very much.
Just your name for the record, please.
Maureen Morrow.
Mr. President, just real quick, I think if the solicitor would look at Section 10, I think we can have one more sign. Section 10 allows...
Okay, go ahead.
Section 10 allows signs exempt from permits, and if you look at H, it says an on-site special event sign displayed by a nonprofit not exceeding 20 square feet with a maximum of one such sign twice in a 12-month period. So he could have it at Grinnell's plus 2 other places.
Good for you, Mike. Now you got 3, maybe we'll find a 4th sooner.
Yeah, I'll amend my motion to allow that additional sign as described.
Second.
And again, it's not part of the vote, but I think seems seems to be a consensus here, at least among some of us, is the hope for a fair-handed discretion and enforcement in these things as we look to revisit this. And I don't see any reason why we wouldn't put this on for the June 10th meeting, as well as the other ordinance issue. We might as well just keep right at it. Okay. I think we have a live motion and a second. Any objection to proceeding to a vote? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Thank you. I hope it's really successful.
Come on out for it. Thanks a lot.
Good luck.
Okay, our next item of general business is sponsored by the town administrator to authorize the appointment of our planning board chair, Susan Gill, as our interim administrative officer. I understand she's willing to do without compensation. Anything to add?
I wasn't aware that I was going to introduce it, but I'll be
okay.
glad to do it. This has to do with the fact that we have a vacancy in the planning office, so we don't have an administrative officer. It's my understanding that Susan is willing to fill in to do some of that work, but would like to make sure that she has the proper authorization so that nobody can dispute that what she's doing is the right thing, and that she would like to make sure that it's a temporary proposition, not something that is a permanent solution.
Like last time.
So 3 years at the most? 2 years. 3 years? Would anybody like to be heard on this matter? All right, very well. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of Planning Board Chair Susan Gill as interim administrative officer.
I'll second that and thank Susan. This is not an easy job, and she spent a long time doing it last time, and we'll try to get a replacement sooner than later.
Great. All those in favor? Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Gill. Okay, next we have, this is general business, but we will take public comment on this. This is sponsored by Councilor Katz. Approval of a resolution declaring Tiverton as a Second Amendment sanctuary town. I'd like Justin to go ahead and introduce the topic. And as we move to public comment, I would like to give speaking priority to the 4 folks who signed up. And all we ask, certainly don't need your address, just your name and your connection to Tiverton, if any. If you don't have a connection to Tiverton, that's okay. But Tiverton residents or those with interest in Tiverton will be given speaking priority, unless you signed up already. Mr. Katz.
This is a resolution that's been going around from various town councils approving it and sending it, as they do, to each other. When I received it for my work over the past few years, I've read more legislation than is probably healthy for one person to read. And I will say I'm not a fan of legislation that simply expresses an opinion. To me, the most important actions we can take are to support the Second Amendment as a town, or to hire a police chief who respects them, which we've done, and to hire a solicitor who supports them, which we've done. But when I started hearing from constituents that Tiverton should sign on to this resolution, I took a second look, and in reviewing what the resolution does, it doesn't merely express an opinion or say we would like a particular piece of legislation. I'd say it actually helps to set policy in a way that affirms our respect for civil rights without making our town the Wild West. So the resolution does this in 2 ways. First, it affirms that our police department will be cognizant and respectful of the Second Amendment rights while enforcing the law. And second, it says that if the state and federal governments attempt to impose laws that lead to so much confiscation of firearms that we would have to increase our capacity to store them, then we're not going to spend local dollars for that purpose. At the same time, and I think this is probably the larger reason people support it, it does send a reminder to the General Assembly and the governor that many people in Rhode Island do not agree with the turn that laws have taken and see them as moving closer and closer to confiscation and a loss of due process rights. Personally, I would say I've seen this in the red flag law and in a firearms transportation law that I think this is the second or third year it's been in the General Assembly, which severely limits when you can transport your weapons. And with that message in mind, I think it's important to say that my view is that the Bill of Rights means what it says, and that these rights shall be infringed, and this is a small way in which the town can affirm that foundational principle for our country.
Okay, and then the actual document is approximately 3 pages, but most of the document are recitals or preambulatory language. The actual resolution would, as Mr. Katz said, really do 2 things. One is to affirm our support of our police department to exercise sound discretion considering the Second Amendment, and then the second part, which is I think a little more concrete, would be that the Tiverton Town Council will not appropriate capital funds for storage of weapons storage facilities on any bill that's unconstitutional. So for this to take effect, there would have to be a finding or I guess a legal opinion, which we would adopt if we adopted it, of unconstitutionality. So I think the word sanctuary can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, but I want to be, and we're going to have a discussion about that, but I just want to be very clear what this proposed resolution actually does. It does 2 and only 2 things. One is affirming our support for the discretion of the police department considering the Second Amendment, and 2, saying that this body would not appropriate capital funds to store weapons in connection with an unconstitutional law. Is that a fair summary? Okay. With that, I'm going to treat this as a public hearing. We're moving pretty well on the schedule. If we go more than 45 minutes, I'll probably have to start to kind of cut down on debate and try not to repeat prior comments. Before I open it up, does anybody from the council want to jump in? Of course, we'll be able to talk further as well.
I would just like the lawyer's opinion on this, and is this okay for us to do? Does this trump any state laws or federal laws, or, I'm just asking? Because we can't do that.
You wouldn't have the jurisdiction to do that anyway.
Right, so we can't do that.
It's a resolution.
So that's all it is.
And we've seen other towns, I guess we just acknowledged one tonight, was it Foster, that has done something like this? Okay. I feel like I've seen another 1 or 2, but I might be wrong.
We have
Okay, I'm going to open up with the floor. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Perry?
Yeah, I was going to ask what the police chief's input is on this. Does he have anything pro or con on this?
He's coming.
We're going to have you sitting closer to the...
Yeah, tonight's your night.
Good evening again. So I think, and I've spoken to my colleagues, the police chiefs in the other communities where this has passed, and just to make it clear for the record, and I'm sure the members of the coalition will make it clear too, as the solicitor just said, this is a resolution only. It does not impact the operations or the enforcement of laws by your police department. We're still going to, we use discretion every day in everything that we do. We're not going to change anything that we do until the laws that are enacted by our state or the federal government change, and then we will change with them. Your police department does not determine constitutionality or even unconstitutionality. We enforce the laws as they are written and passed by our criminal justice system.
So let me ask, why do this then? It's just, I think it's a valid question. What is our purpose for doing this?
Well, as I said, for the larger purpose, I think people want to see this done is the message it sends. And I think it sends that in a way that still has some practical implications. There's discretion, which, you have to decide between multiple variables, and if the town council has issued a statement on something, setting a sort of policy that does affect discretion, I would hope. And also it does offer the protection as, say, the General Assembly considers a legislation to restrict when you can transport firearms. They'll look at the number of towns that have said, we are not going to build storage facilities for these firearms, and take that into consideration, where we are not going to expend our own funds to build storage facilities. So,
If I may, I hesitate to weigh in, but I am concerned with the way this is drafted and leaves, in my view, quite a bit of ambiguity as to what, for example, the police department is expected to do or not. And I don't know how supportive that is of the police department, because I think the chief, in a very polite way, said, with all due respect,
We're going to do what we have to.
the law is the law, and we're enforcing the law. There's you can read this many different ways, and different sections read differently. On the one hand, it's very careful to say that, everybody respects the law. We're not going to try to violate the law. On the other hand, there's a little bit of a tone in there that if we disagree with, for example, a law that may get passed in the state, then somehow this discretion allows us to not enforce it.
Right.
Certainly, people are getting that impression, and I've heard that feedback quite a bit. And I think that puts the police department in a very difficult position. And I'm not sure that's a wise thing to do.
Now,
And the same for me. I took an oath to uphold the laws. Not the laws only that you like or not, enforce the laws that you don't like. I am supposed to uphold the law that is the law. And this frankly creates a little bit of ambiguity, in my opinion. And I just want to express that concern.
Now, if we confiscate these guns, suppose he confiscates the guns, he has to store them somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
So even if we say to you, well, we're not going to give you money to store them, you've got to do something with them. By law, you have to do something with them.
With all due respect, I'll send you the bill.
Right. That's what I expect. Right. That's what I wanted you to say, because what else would you do?
Right.
Scrap iron.
And I will also say, just for the record, and again, there's a process here. And my job, as you all know, I also took an oath. It's to enforce the laws. But under our charter, under 902, there's also non-interference. That makes it very specific for members of the council, the administrator, and politicians to dictate and tell the police department what to do.
Right.
So, I mean, from that perspective, I understand the people that are here tonight to express their opinions, which as a police officer, it's my job to enforce that they have the ability to do that. But when it comes to laws that would go against existing ordinances, resolutions that go against existing laws, from my perspective, and I thank the administrator for kind of pointing this out, we're going to do our job.
Right.
Resolution or not.
Mr. President,
So what's at stake?
I did not draft this, so I'm not speaking from, the standpoint of pride of authorship or anything like that. But I disagree with the administrator respectfully. I don't think there's any ambiguity here. It certainly doesn't impose any ambiguity in terms of the way that the police are going to execute their responsibilities or their responsibilities. You just heard how the police are going to execute their responsibilities. This doesn't change that.
So why have it?
I guess
That's a question for the council to
That's the question. Why have it if it doesn't change anything?
Yeah, Donna, and then I have a follow-up.
Right. To answer Counselor DiMederos, I think it's sending a message to upstate and our legislators and senators that don't seem to be listening to us on many different issues, that we're not going to put up with them infringing on the Second Amendment. I also believe that it's saying that if they do want to confiscate, that we are not going to use funds to store it and use taxpayer money to store it. We don't want to take part in any part of something being passed that takes guns away from people and makes us use taxpayers' money to store the guns. It's just sending a message that they need to stop with the laws that infringe on the Second Amendment, and that's something that they can or cannot do. They choose to do that, and they can choose not to do it. It's very clear that there shouldn't be any infringement on the Second Amendment, but yet, over and over again, they try to do it by a little at a time, by 1,000, knife pricks or whatever, until finally you're going, how did we get from here to there, where now we got to turn our guns in? It happens a little at a time. It doesn't happen all at once. And after a while, that's when you notice that you have lost the Second Amendment. And usually, it's the first thing they do when they want to take over is they take your guns and you're using rocks. So it's just, that's all it is.
Every country, Venezuela, Germany.
I'm sorry, we're going to keep the order, we're going to try. So,
Can I just speak to, mainly to the administrator's point? Having a thoroughly developed political philosophy, I have no trouble creating a little tension in the law. I mean, until we start ordering our police to stand at the border, holding back state police, I mean, this is how democracy is supposed to work. They overreach, we push back a little, things get uncomfortable, and something gets resolved. I think that's an entirely appropriate way to move forward.
okay, so what I'd like to do, I want to make sure that, since I think 4 or 5 of us, I have a comment. I want to make sure that Nancy and Tricia, if they want to say something now, I'm going to turn it over to the public. I just want to comment on this idea of discretion is, I mean, if you look at, let's say marijuana, right? I mean, is that like legal now in Massachusetts for recreational, and it's legal in Rhode Island for medicine? I think that's right? There's not a single person in the room that wouldn't admit that it's a violation of federal law. So it's a little more complicated than just to say we all take oaths and we follow every law that's out there, and there's a sort of a practical, I think a couple of minutes ago on the agenda, you were hearing a consensus that we're hoping that our zoning official, who is also one of our law enforcement officers in the town, uses discretion as you figure out how to allocate scarce time and resources. And I think that's kind of the spirit of how you look at these when you're trying to express a policy interest. So that's just a comment that I'm hoping we kind of remember, that there's a lot of gray and ambiguity and enforcement. So did you want to, I want to make sure that the other two councils had a comment.
Mr.
We'll
President?
come back to.
Just a
Sure.
point of order. I'd just like to clarify, if anybody got the impression that I didn't support the zoning official doing his job in the way that he's supposed to, I'd like to clarify that, because I don't relate that discussion, while I was sympathetic to Mr. Roderick's situation, to anything having to do with the zoning official having discretion as to which zoning, which parts of the zoning code he would enforce or would not enforce. I'd just like to clarify that.
No, I just want to say I agree with Donna, and I agree with Justin, and I think there has been a creep. I don't think this does anything to change what the law currently is constitutionally or within the state of Rhode Island, and it certainly doesn't do anything to change the town's ability to enforce the law as it's currently written. I do think that there has been some pressure in terms of this confiscation, that the issue came up, how are we going to store them? And I agree with Donna, this is like an overreach. Well, I don't know, I guess that's your problem. You'll have to build a storage facility, and I don't think the taxpayer should have to do that.
Okay, Christine Bendoni is first in line.
Hi.
Just let us know your.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Please. Thank you.
My name's Christine Bandoni, and I'm a Tiverton resident, and I'm a volunteer for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and I'm just going to make a few points. As Chief Jones stated, law enforcement, with resolutions such as these, law enforcement do not get to pick and choose what laws to enforce. They must enforce laws that have been enacted. Municipalities do not have the authority to regulate firearms in Rhode Island due to preemption laws. That's the Rhode Island General Laws, Section 114758. Resolutions such as these accomplish nothing. They are disrespectful to survivors of gun violence and are out of step with the way the majority of Rhode Islanders feel about common sense gun safety reform. It seems to me that this resolution does not address a specific issue to do with current or proposed gun laws, and rather it feels like a group of people serving on a town council are displeased with the direction the state is going with regards to gun legislation, and knows that they have a majority for such a resolution, so they're going for it. All this does is create a distraction to the priority gun bills that the governor and the attorney general have put forth this session. Again, common sense gun safety reform that does not infringe on Second Amendment rights and that a majority of Rhode Islanders agree with. Thanks.
Linda Finn, please.
Hi, my name is Linda Finn. I'm not a Tiverton resident. I'm a resident of Middletown, but I'm the executive director of the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. Thank you for taking time to listen to me. I just want to clarify, I have some comments that I was going to make, but I just want to clarify something to begin with, is that none of the laws that are being proposed right now in the General Assembly, that the Attorney General, the Governor, and the state senators and representatives are proposing would confiscate any weapons from anybody. I think that has to be made extremely clear, that there's not a single law that's being proposed right now to confiscate weapons. And so I think that is something that needs to be made very clear to everybody. And certainly if weapons were taken in a situation where there's a domestic violence situation, or in relation to the law that was passed last year, the Extreme Risk Protection Order, which removes weapons from individuals who are either suicidal or homicidal, they can be stored in the town, but they can also be stored at federally licensed firearms dealers. So it's not that the idea that the town would all of a sudden have this big influx of weapons, I think is mistaken. And I am here because we are Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. We have many thousands of members around the state. We have 123 members that live in Tiverton. And so I'm here pretty much representing them, and my comments I think are shared by them as well. One of the things I would also like to point out is over the past few years, your school committee has signed resolutions in support of one of the bills that has been up for several years now. Sorry, this microphone's really. And I can pass those around if that's okay. Right now, Rhode Island is one of only 5 states that generally allows people with concealed carry permits to carry on school property without anybody knowing who they are or why they're on the school property. So for example, the school administrator, school principal does not know if a teacher is carrying a gun, a parent's carrying a gun in a teacher conference, parent may be carrying a gun on a football field. We're an outlier in that. There are states, rural states, that do allow people to carry guns on school property, but they have extra training. They are known by the administration. They're known by the law enforcement. So if the law enforcement were to come to a school shooting situation, they would know who that shooter is, or who the person was protecting the students. But in Rhode Island, we don't have that situation. And so that's something that we've been advocating for changing since 2013. Your school committee has voted on and supported resolutions to support that law for the last 3 years, and it hasn't passed the General Assembly. And I think it's also really, really important. I sent you an email earlier today, and I'm sure you got a lot of emails, but none of the laws that are on the books in Rhode Island right now, nor any of the laws that are being proposed, violate the Second Amendment. And I think it's really important that that is made very clear as well. And I can pass these around too, if you don't mind. I sent this in an email, but I'll send it to you so you can look at it as well. And just recently, the Federal Court of Appeals in Boston had a challenge to their assault weapon ban that they established in 1994. And just back in April, just last month, it was unanimously held that the law is constitutionally permitted, so that you can make restrictions on banning certain types of weapons. You can make restrictions on banning high-capacity magazines, and you can make restrictions about having guns on school property. So to say that the laws are not constitutional and that this city council, town council will decide whether they're constitutional or not, I think it does put undue pressure on law enforcement to have a town council deciding that they're determining whether or not a law is constitutional or not. And really, in our country, the process is, if you think something's unconstitutional, you go to court and you take the parties to court, and then you let the courts decide. That's how our country is run. And I think it's really important to also understand that gun laws are not made to harm gun owners. They're made to protect the public from gun violence and from gun accidents and from murder and from suicide. We have laws in the books that protect. They protect our community. We have laws to make sure that if somebody commits domestic violence and they've been convicted of that, that we don't allow them to have weapons. We don't allow them to have firearms, and that protects the women and the children and their families. We passed a law last year, the Extreme Risk Protection Order. That was passed after the Heartland shooter. It was realized that he bought his guns lawfully, and his family knew that he had issues and that he'd made threats, but there was no law on the books to actually remove the weapons from him, even though he was a danger to others. And obviously he was a danger to others in killing 17 students last year. So I think to say that gun laws are only being proposed or voted on to harm lawful gun owners, I think is a misconception. And I think that, there's laws being proposed for safe storage. We know that suicides are prevented in states that have strong safe storage laws, and so Rhode Island does not have a mandatory storage law. So that's a law that's on the books, it's being proposed. It's not a gun-grabbing law, it's a law to protect young people who have access to their parents' firearms. They know where the keys are, they know where but we need to do things to make sure that we can keep them from them, so if they're going to be a harm to themselves. So I think it's, and I think in my email to you, I said, it's one thing to say that you oppose legislation. So if you want to cite the assault weapons ban and you say as a policy, we just don't support that policy and we're not going to support it, I think that's one thing. And I know the town of Gloucester, after their meeting, the town administrator is working with some of the residents in the town to change the resolution, to change the language, so it doesn't have that discretion language in there. It just says, from what I understand, I haven't seen the final draft, that they're saying, well, we oppose that legislation, and that's fine. I mean, that's what town councils and city, school committees do all the time. They either support legislation or they don't support it. But to say that you're going to give discretion or take discretion, I think is a really dangerous thing, and I think that's what we have opposition to. Sorry, I didn't know there was a time limit. I'm not from the town, so okay. Well, I appreciate you letting me speak longer than that. I'm sorry. If I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Were you wrapping up?
I was wrapping up. So anyway, I just think that my point being is that a resolution is one thing to say you don't support legislation. I think the language that's in this resolution, it's ambiguous. I think it's confusing for law enforcement, and I think that I just think that if you're going to pass a resolution, and obviously if there's members that support, they don't support the laws that are being proposed, that's great. Put that in the resolution. But I think to take out the discretion wording, I think is very important. Thank you for your time.
Maureen Moreau, still here?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having this public forum. I'm going to echo a little bit about what Christine and Linda said. I sent all of you an email, and I hope it was distributed. I also wrote to Chief Jones, hoping that he would be present tonight, because I see him as a leader and a reasonable person, and I'm glad he's here. I have to say, when I learned about this resolution a few days ago, I was dismayed. I think the intent of it is to sow discord in our town, and I don't think this is a time when we need that. We just came through a pretty muddy budget process. We have a lot of things to celebrate in this town, and I think this is just dividing. Town councils cannot pick and choose the laws that they will enforce. We are a country of laws, and the town must abide by the U.S. Constitution, the rules and regulations of the state of Rhode Island, and the state constitution. If you take any issue and look at it generically, what would you think? Let's just put aside gun legislation. What would you think if a town, either in the past or going forward, just decided we're going to cherry pick a law that's on the books, that's been upheld by the Constitution, as these laws have been, and Linda Finn just outlined that, and said we're just going to give the police discretion? That's the part of this resolution that just stopped me in my tracks. like how you would give discretion. And I understand, Mr. Katz, I think what you're doing is you're trying to shake things up. And democracy is a messy business. I think we all know that. We've seen it at the federal level, the state level, and now here we are at the town level. I want to just answer or just respond to what Councilor Cook said a few minutes ago, that there's a legislative creep, that we need to push back. I'm trying to think of other words that she used. There's a way of doing that. Myself and other members of the group that I'm with are up at the State House. Often, we write to our reps and our senators. I write to Jack Reed. I write to Sheldon Whitehouse. This is democracy in action. It's citizens using their representative government. It's not pulling this kind of stunt. It's not dividing a town on a Second Amendment issue. So I just want to say, loud and clear, gun control is constitutional. So it is constitutional, and I really would request that people do not speak out. It's been upheld, as Linda said, recently with the Massachusetts assault weapon ban and High Capacity Magazine, referring to a Supreme Court decision. So we have to stop this. This is just, as a citizen of this town, if this passes tonight, and I hope every one of you thinks very carefully about your vote, it will be a disgrace that the town of Tiverton is saying we're going to give police discretion on a law or a set of laws, because you have to worry about what's going to happen in the future. Thank you.
Okay, so David Formanek, please.
Hi, good evening. I'm David Formanek. I live in North Court in Tiverton. And I perceive that these are dangerous times for Americans. And this resolution, it seems to me, is intended to deliberately to stir up more division and anger within our community. And as I look around this room and read Facebook posts, it has clearly been successful. In these times, some organizations have found it serves their purposes to stir up fear between Americans. That fear is counterfactual. Violent crime has fallen by close to 2/3 since the 1990s. American exceptionalism describes our 243 years as a nation under the rule of law. In other countries, people have sometimes come to power who proceed to ignore laws, leading to totalitarian dictatorship, the loss of freedom by the populations. We require of American leaders that they obey laws and not flout them, even while selectively quoting parts of judicial decisions. The nullification crisis of 1828, when slaveholding states whose slave owners the Second Amendment was intended to protect against insurrection, led directly to the Civil War. Nullification, even on the state and local level, has never been upheld by the courts. The way to change laws is to hold elections. Decisions such as this one are not to be made by fewer than a handful of local officials, but by voting. This is how it is done in America. This resolution, it seems to me, is a grave danger to our political existence. In other countries in which division and hatred are stoked, civil war inevitably follows. Civil war is not flags, banners, and glory. Civil wars are fought in neighborhoods, between neighborhoods, as we saw in former Yugoslavia, in Lebanon, in Syria. There are no rules in civil warfare, only the triumph of uncontrollable hatred. Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill said, "All politics is local." This is one occasion on which we must step back from a path that can lead only to unrestricted violence. We all have a duty to ensure domestic tranquility, as the United States Constitution says, or we will see us crumble from within and devoured by its enemies without. This resolution intentionally makes Tiverton an outlaw town in this state and damages civil society. I request that it be withdrawn from consideration. I do not believe Town Council has the authority to speak for me or others before we have gone to the polls about it. Thank you very much.
So I want to let you go next. If you-
They've actually said everything
Okay.
I wanted to say.
And then it's an open floor, although I don't know how many intend to speak. I want to make sure if there's speakers from the other side that they haven't, make sure they have the chance to be heard. But Mr. McLaughlin, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, pretty much everybody here knows who I am, Bill McLaughlin. This is pretty much a token response, making us a sanctuary city. It's great, and it sends a message in a way. If this council wanted to do something meaningful for the gun owners here to help them preserve their rights, you would put the sponsors of this legislation's names, email addresses, and phone numbers on the town website. Their committee members' emails, phone numbers on the town website. Because I'm going to tell everybody in this room, I've been lobbying for over 30 years for the Rhode Island Motorcycle Association up in Providence. And when they start getting 5,000 and 6,000 emails and phone calls a week about a subject, they'll sit up and listen. The town council going, yeah, we're a sanctuary city. They're going to laugh and go, that's just Tiverton. Your personal response is the only thing that's going to protect your rights, not what the town does here tonight.
How you doing? I'm Dan Bedandi. I'm a gun rights advocate here for the state of Rhode Island, a resident of the state of Rhode Island. Thank you, ma'am, for your patriotism. God bless you. Everybody's talking about laws today. Laws, laws, laws. We took a sworn oath. I took an oath myself. So he took an oath. You all took an oath, all right? Now you say you took an oath on the law. No, you took an oath on the Constitution. The law of the land is the Constitution, not what the governor says. If anything, if everybody knows anything about civics, that's why, it should be mandatory in school. Civics clearly says, purely, any law that's repugnant to the Constitution is automatically null and void and shall not be infringed. The Rhode Island State Constitution is the only constitution that mimics the Second Amendment. The people's right to keep and bear arms, not the militia. The militia are the people anyway, defined by James Madison. And just in case this man's article he throws up here that says the militia is only for the military. No, it's the people, so says James Madison and the Founding Fathers. Now, the law of the land is the Constitution we all took a sworn oath to defend and uphold. If I'm correct, please, if I'm wrong, sorry, please correct me, because that's the law of the land. And the law of the land, it designates we the people to do, in other words, we elected officials out there to do the job we want you to do, uphold the Constitution. Now, if it comes to a time, clearly states that our officials do not do their job, it then becomes designated to the we the people to make sure that's done. And we want to uphold the Constitution, and we respect the law here in Rhode Island. We got a great state police unit, local town police officers, great, they do their jobs. That's why we have the second lowest crime murder rates in the country, considering with firearms, because they do their job. We have many great law-abiding citizens here that do our jobs. Now, Mrs. Finn said the legislation at the State House doesn't call for confiscation. Well, guess what? If the semi-automatic assault weapons ban gets pushed and the high-capacity magazines, all of us own those weapons. Now we're going to become do we turn them in or become criminals if this thing passes? You know what I mean? And we become criminals, and therefore it would force police to enact unconstitutionally to enforce these laws to confiscate these weapons, and therefore where this resolution falls in, that, it says, hey, you know what? You can't enforce an unconstitutional law. I mean, gun control is failing miserably all over the country. Mrs. Finn says they have thousands of supporters. They don't. I got tons of videos to prove it. At the State House, okay, we have thousands to one outnumbering them every single time. Every town hall, we outnumber them. They have to bring people from Connecticut, Mass to support them, because all of Rhode Island, and the real polls show, most of Rhode Island, Democrat, Republican, all support the Second Amendment. And it's not about political parties, it's about the Constitution and the preservation. The very sacred thing. Now look at Venezuela, what's going on with that. They gave up their gun rights. Hundreds of millions of people in the 1900s died because they thought their government was going to keep them safe. And I know people say, well, it never happened here. Well, the Germans said the same thing. The Cubans said the same thing. Polish said the same thing. And guess what happened? Hundreds of millions of people died by the hands of their own government. Now, we're not going to say, God forbid anything would ever happen like that here, but all asking as a town here is just to respect the Constitution. That's the law of the land. And anything that takes away firearms, that shall not be infringed. I mean, can somebody define that? Okay, shall not be infringed. It doesn't say, well, except for this weapon and that weapon. And yes, back then they had high capacity magazines, or like basically the Gatling guns and everything else. Forms of those guns, rapid fire guns, back in the 1700s. So people can't say it was designated to muskets. No, it wasn't. It was the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. Is plain and simple, clear as day. That you don't need to go to Harvard to interpret that. It's clear as day. I mean, we all learned that at least when I went to civics class, you know what I mean? So we're just asking the town here just to support the Constitution. And, you know, because we the people here, we want to be free people. We want to live our lives, respect the law, have a great community, but we do not want to be in those numbers from the 1900s where hundreds of millions of people died because of gun control. Look at Chicago. Just this weekend alone, I think it was almost 140 people died. And they say we got the strictest and best gun control laws in the country. Now Chicago's looking to Providence for help because they can't figure out why are these people dying. 140 people almost died just this weekend because law-abiding citizens could not defend themselves against criminals who do not follow laws. So, I mean, I'm not going to say I bore you all the stats. I mean, the stats are clear as day. But, you know, just thank you all for hearing me. And, you know, just basically I just ask you to vote for accordance to this resolution. And before I go, if people think a resolution does mean nothing, well, you know what? If you need to know your history, because the resolution created the Bill of Rights. The resolution created the Constitution. That's what a resolution is. And it means very much to a lot of people, and it created the greatest document on the planet is the Constitution. And thank you. God bless.
Hi, Adam Raposa. I live in Tiverton with my wife and daughter. The reason for my support for the Second Amendment movement is largely because our government isn't going to tell me how to protect my family and friends and neighbors. I'm not going to sit back and have a government that I currently do not trust dictate how my rights are exercised and how my family and I need to protect ourselves from any threat. Whether it's a break-in, hijacking, attempt to abduct, or do us harm. Some may believe this is paranoia, but if the time comes when an invading force grows the courage to launch an attack on an unarmed nation, I don't want to be hiding in my house waiting for the front lines to break down. If we ever find ourselves as a nation back in our heels, we need to do what we've done for hundreds of years, shoot back with lots of guns and lots of bullets. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Just a little background. My name is Mike Burke. I am the head of the Tiverton Democrats and a resident of Tiverton. Little background, I grew up in Pennsylvania as a hunter. Not a very good hunter. Didn't get too many animals, but got some. And I also grew up in Pennsylvania as a member, at that time, of the National Rifle Association. So I have some experience and knowledge of guns rights, of using those appropriately for appropriate purposes. Also, as a member of the school committee, and I believe Denise may have been on at the same time. Well, we were always on at the same time. We had a case before us of a student who had been identified as having made threats to other students. And we had a huge discussion. I won't tell you what the outcome of it was, but part of my involvement in that discussion was making sure that folks understood that even though this young person had made threats and significant threats and may have had access to firearms, we brought his parents in. And I asked, where's your guns? The father described how the guns were locked in appropriate locking cabinets within the house. Where's the ammunition? The father described how that was locked separately in a different building where his son did not know where it was, in appropriate locked cabinets. So, again, I can't disclose the outcome of that, but I have a good understanding of what safe and sound gun ownership is and should be. I say that also saying that I think this resolution is simply political gamesmanship. And Mr. Katz alluded to it in the beginning, when he spoke about his own personal political agenda and philosophy. This goes well outside of any platform that any member of this council ran on, regardless of which side you were on. I do not remember any discussions in the election process of the Second Amendment, of gun rights and the like. So I see no mandate to anybody on this council to take up this resolution. And certainly, although Councilor Cook would like to suggest that you're speaking on behalf of all of the citizens of Tiverton in your positions on gun legislation, you're not. There are I don't have the facts before me, but I appreciate Mrs. Finn and the other women's comments about the facts. And there are plenty of people in Tiverton who support the common sense legislation that was described before. It's political gamesmanship because none of you wear judicial robes. You don't get to choose what's constitutional and what's not. And as the chief said, he doesn't either, nor do his officers. It's political gamesmanship because you cannot tie the hands through a resolution of future councils. So this is simply expressing what I assume is going to be a 4-3 vote on this. I could be wrong. And you cannot circumvent the process for making ordinances, the laws of the town. So if you really felt strongly about not using dollars for capital construction for this purpose, I would urge you, do an ordinance. Would I oppose it? Absolutely. But that's the proper way to do it. Finally, if you're so inclined to focus on supporting the Constitution, then I hope in future meetings you put forth resolutions supporting some of the other articles of the Bill of Rights. Freedom of speech and religion. So, for example, some people would believe that the town should not hold the Christmas parades and the holiday tree lighting out here because it supports one religion over another, one set of religions over another. I don't hear or see anything related to that. Another would be Article 13, or Amendment 13. Anybody know what that one is? I won't put you on the spot.
Slavery, isn't it?
Slavery.
Yeah, slavery.
Slavery and involuntary servitude. I don't see anybody putting forth resolutions to take positions on that when we know that human trafficking and sex trafficking, especially of minors, is one of the biggest, most horrendous issues facing our society today, and here in Rhode Island too. So please put aside the political gamesmanship, and hopefully it won't be the 4-3 vote that I assume.
I won't hold to strictly. I'm just hoping maybe 15 minutes or so more of debate. Let me know if that's wildly out of line, for those who want to speak, but just.
How you doing? Anthony Daniels, Rhode Island resident. I'm not going to stand up here for 10 minutes. Just look at the amount of yellow shirts. That should clear what's going on. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody's dressed properly. And just look around at the room. Thank you.
Can people, can folks describe more specifically their relationship to Tiverton? That's pretty important with a resolution of this nature. Now, Mrs. Finn represents 130 members of the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. I'm not sure what the last few gentlemen represent for Tiverton. And that's important.
Yeah, definitely, if we run out of time, Tiverton residents will have priority. So, see, as you're lining up there, if you're a Tiverton resident, feel free to come up to the front. Ma'am.
Victoria Neville, Connecticut Street. When I came in here, I didn't know what was going on with this. I have not seen any articles about it. Are we taking guns away from people? I don't understand why there is such an uproar. We're just trying. If they break the law, we take their guns. We have to store their guns. this is another thing of Justin Katz trying to divide this town. They're not taking your guns. Who think? Bill, it's not taking your guns. And you're talking about maybe. You're talking about maybe they might do this and maybe they might do that. We're not talking about maybes. We need to follow the law. If somebody needs their gun taken away because of mental illness or a crime or abuse or whatever, that's what needs to be done.
Good evening. My name's Jeffrey Gross. I am a Tiverton resident. I live on Stafford Road. I'm also the communications officer for the Federated Sportsmen's Clubs of Rhode Island. I'm a military veteran and I'm an NRA member. So, here's the facts. The U.S. has an identical constitution to our little state's constitution. The governor, the AG, and most of the liberal state house, Senate, and House are looking to violate that constitution. If people supposedly in Tiverton support gun control, where are they? I drove 6 hours tonight from Maine, fought 2.5 hours of Boston traffic because this issue is that important tonight. So, that being said, I noticed nobody addressed any current SCOTUS court cases coming up. In June, approximately June 28th, a decision that will affect our red flag law in Rhode Island will be decided. It involves a veteran that has PTSD. Second, there is another case, and they had it in private conference last week to decide if they're going to hear it, and that's Rogers versus Gruel. It is a concealed carry case. They will decide if they choose to hear it, which we should know within a week, whether or not you have the constitutional right to carry concealed, and more so, carry openly without a permit. I'm hearing a lot of distorted facts tonight, and that's troublesome because distorted facts only confuse the situation in general. The Constitution trumps everything. Our little state says we have the right to bear arms. That's it in a nutshell. There's a concern, and my sympathy goes out for the chief being caught up in this on both sides. He's got to remain neutral. But for the record, there are numerous police chiefs and sheriffs out west that are refusing to enforce the assault weapons ban because they acknowledge it's unconstitutional. And for the record, as for this resolution before the town, recently it went before the town of West Greenwich, and it is up for hearing in Coventry. The West Greenwich Police Chief and the previous Coventry Police Chief are members of my gun club, and they support that. And one other thing that came up in the Heller decision, Justice Scalia specifically made it unconstitutional to lock your guns up and have gun locks. So keep that in mind. And also, for the record, 1790, the Native Americans of Block Island were restricted on gun ownership. They could not own firearms because of possibility of an uprising out there. So this gun control issue is not new to us. Thank you and have a good evening.
Tim Connick, 15 Salisbury Street, Tiverton, Rhode Island. I didn't come here to speak, I just came to show my support. All the people coming from other towns that decided to come up here and speak compelled me to get up here. I just have a couple of questions. One, do criminals give a crap what laws you make? No, because they're criminals. I don't care what laws they make, the only laws they make are going to affect me, a law-abiding citizen. You're going to make me a criminal. So I came here to put my support behind this resolution, which, as I see it, truly does nothing. All it does is send a message to the State House, enough is enough. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Forts. I live on Shove Street in Tiverton. I'm a 20-year retired military police sergeant of the U.S. Army and a veteran of the war in Iraq. I know there's a lot of emotion on both sides. We've heard it all. I support the resolution because I know it sends a message. It has no force of law. But the current semi-automatic weapons that I own, if they break or wear out, if a law is passed banning them, I won't be able to replace it because I know that's the tool that I need properly to defend myself and my family. Evil exists in this world. I've seen it. I've fought it. I'm tired of being myself and fellow gun owners being blamed for the actions of a few madmen. We're not to blame. None of my legally purchased and stored firearms have ever hurt anybody. They will not hurt anybody unless someone decides to try and hurt me or my family. So I appreciate this resolution being put forward. I hope you pass it. I understand if it doesn't, but I thank you for your time and attention in this matter.
Good evening. Michael Ferrera from Connecticut Street, and I'm here in support of this resolution, and I'm hoping that you are too. But I want to talk about the firearms community within this town. You know, we do have 2 gun ranges here. We have 2 gun stores within our town. We have hundreds of acres of hunting property, state-owned, town-owned. So at any given time, there are people in and out of this town with firearms. Not a single issue. Tiverton's also one of the highest issuers of concealed carry permits. On closing, the other day I participated in a fundraiser for the Tiverton Fire Department, which is a clays and clams fundraiser. Firearms were included with that. We had to break clay pigeons. You know, I congratulate the Tiverton Fire Department for putting on such an event. Thank you.
James DuBois, 14 Wood Avenue, Tiverton, Rhode Island. I wasn't going to speak here tonight, but this woman said there's nobody here from Tiverton. Well, they brought a speaker from Middletown, and she's took up most of the time before anybody got a chance to speak. I believe that you should pass this resolution because they're messing with our rights. And if they start with the Second Amendment, who knows where they go next.
My name is Caroline Connick. I have lived here in Tiverton for the past 20 years. I am also an alumni of all the Tiverton schools. I just wanted to say I didn't come out here to speak either. I came just to show my support as well. I learned how to shoot when I was 12 years old, and I joined the NRA at that same age. I'm a lawful and responsible gun owner myself, and I am not going to hurt anyone. I'm not a danger to anyone, and it's not fair to treat lawful and responsible gun owners this way. And I think something else I need to address, someone had mentioned suicide rates. I've been through a few suicides of loved ones, people in my life, and they used bridges, ropes. Guns aren't the problem, mental health is. So, thank you.
President, council members, my name is Michael Dennett. I'm a Tiverton resident for the past few years. I absolutely love living in this little town. As for the CCW you talked about and concealed carry, those people are the upstanding, most outstanding citizens and law-abiding people that live in our great nation, for the simple fact that they have to go through such scrutiny and hoops just to get that carry permit. And as for the laws, I've read the bill that they've been trying to pass from Rhode Island. It's disturbing to me that they are trying to pass laws for magazine capacity and the semi-automatics. How do they plan, the locking, storing of firearms, how do they plan on enforcing these laws? They're gonna come kick in my door and search my house and see how I store my weapons? They're gonna come in and and take these things for granted, where are my rights under these rules? And I believe that we do need to send a message. We need to send a message to everyone in America that we need to stand strong and stand together, because if we don't, things are going to fall apart. I love this country, and I know everybody in here does, no matter what side you're on. God bless America. We need to stand strong and send a message to the rest of this nation to say we will not go away in the dark. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Gary Garofalo. I live here on Ford Farm Road. Been a resident of Tiverton since about 2004. My wife Joyce is here attending with me. As you can see, I am not the enemy to anybody here, all right? I'm a local business person. We're pretty respected in this community. I do not have any disagreement with a lot of stuff you ladies are saying. You probably have been involved with being victims or had victims in your world. I'm here to tell you that's not happening on my block or my house, okay? All this yellow stuff here, it doesn't mean a lot other than you don't have to say anything, guys. You really don't. The tone, the undertone, we're not paranoid, we're vigilant. I'm an NRA instructor, I'm a chief range safety officer, all right? I train a lot. We're not here to be paranoid, we're not here to harm anyone. The town of Tiverton has a beautiful club here, Tiverton Rod and Gun. I think last check it's like 1,400 members. It's 1860. Awesome. When I got in, it was 11. So my point is, there's been stuff on Facebook, I don't know how accurate it is, but there's something like 300 million guns in this country and 12 trillion rounds of ammunition. If there was a problem, I assure you, just the yellow shirts in this room would be the problem, all right? So we have to get some type of understanding. Yes, these ladies need to be respected and hear them. I agree with the gentleman who said this is going to mean nothing if you guys vote. It isn't going to mean anything. That gentleman has to uphold the laws that we all approve as society. It is just a statement. All right, my friend Mike, I asked him, I said, what's his Second Amendment thing about, Foster, Gloucester? I didn't know. It just meant, hey, they're making a public statement, hey, we're respecting the Second Amendment. Doesn't mean we're gonna start shooting at him if he comes to my house. I'm gonna put my hands up and say, Chief, what's the problem? And he may have to tell me bad news, and I'm gonna comply, all right? But there's a lot of overzealousness on both parts. I've often heard someone that negotiates very well say sometimes you got to go extreme one way, they go extreme the other way, and you meet in a happy medium. Maybe you folks are used to that. I've never been on a town council. I don't care to be. No, I'm being honest with you. I don't have the time, the patience, energy. But I just ask everyone to just please respect these ladies, but please respect those of us that really care about this country. We've all seen, I have a lot of black friends, and I remind them, that's how slavery started, guys. Down south, the first thing they did is take the guns away. Germany, Venezuela, all that stuff's been highlighted. It's history. You cannot defy history. You just can't. I know you think we're in a peaceful world. That gentleman's seen stuff I don't ever want to see, all right? And a lot of detectives and police have. They keep the cap on all this crap, all right? We are responsible for ourselves. We're not the police, but we want to be responsible for our own home, our own families, and our friends, all right? Thank you for letting me rant on. Thank you.
Cameron Ramsey, Tiverton, Rhode Island. I don't mind ambiguity when it comes to yard signs or roller derbies, but when we're talking about does a domestic violence abuser get to keep his gun in Tiverton compared to in Little Compton, that's a different cause. Please do the right thing. This is silly. Thank you.
Any other last call for public comments?
Last call, Richard. I'll be quick, as I usually.
We're doing okay on schedule.
I wish to thank the council for bringing this subject up, this matter up. I agree with Donna, Councilwoman Cook. It's about how we respect our Constitution. it is the most powerful law in the nation and in our state. In our state, it has a very simple statement about guns. And it goes, we the people, the people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. That means gun law 1 is unconstitutional. They do not, it is completely inconsistent to have a statement that you shall not infringe, and then you come up with gun laws that infringe. And this is where I wish these ladies. Why? Others have done, and
They shouldn't have done either. Wait a second, guys, what's the problem?
folks.
Well, they're talking to us. They should be
Okay, and other speakers have done that well. You cannot demand an answer from a member of the audience, but if you'd like to speak to
And,
the audience.
and I'm not
Okay.
demanding. I wish they would, instead of coming up with gun laws, gun control laws, I wish they would change the Constitution. If our Constitution, if the Rhode Island Constitution stated that the people's right to keep and bear arms shall be governed by law, well then, terrific. You know, come up with gun control laws. But it doesn't say that. So where they need to start, or how they need to solve this problem is to change the Constitution. And now you are acting in the proper manner to get things changed to where you want. And this is what I think the resolution says to our state governor and state house, that we want you to follow the proper procedures. And the proper procedures is to change the Constitution. You know, if you want to be really good about gun control, you can be like Illinois. You can just say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall be denied. And look how well that does. So, thank you for this opportunity to talk.
May I have another quick
Sounds like
comment?
everybody that's wanted to be heard has been heard. Just anybody that has first time, and then we'll let you have a brief.
Hi, I'm Carl Dumas, 48 years in Tiverton. When I was 17 years old, talk to these guys, the U.S. government gave me a gun, sent me to a faraway land to protect all you guys. And now, with a stroke of a pen, you want to make me a criminal. And that kind of hurts me. That's all I can say.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things, because one of the disadvantages of going early is that I just feel like I need to correct things, including what this gentleman just said. He served our country, and I thank him for that, but we're not trying to make him a criminal. I'm not sure where that comes from. We're not trying to take his gun away. So the point is, and actually Mr. Rahm made it too, proper procedures have to be followed. We do have a U.S. Constitution. We have state laws. We have a state constitution. And the whole process of a democracy is legislation is introduced. And I think it was you, Mr. Katz, early in the evening said something about legislation as an opinion, or it starts as an opinion. Did you say that?
No, I said I disagree with legislation. It is purely
Opinion. Most pieces of legislation start as an opinion. It might be, everyone should take the responsibility to have health insurance. That might be an opinion that then becomes law, as an example. So that is the process that has to be followed. It's unfortunate, or actually it's unfortunate for folks that don't want to follow it, but it's fortunate for us as the United States citizens. We have a format. We have the ability to go to your representative government, make changes to the law. They can go up through the appeals court, and in this case, these laws have been found to be constitutional. And then in response to the gentleman who was talking about, people, concealed carry are the greatest people on earth, I do invite you all, I don't know if Linda Finn passed this out, these are examples of where concealed carry weapons holders, guns, got in the wrong hands on the grounds of schools across the country. These are verifiable news stories. So folks are law-abiding citizens with guns until something happens. That guy in Las Vegas, I think he had a pretty relatively clean record as a law-abiding citizen until he wasn't. And we all know what that story brought about. So thank you again. I really do encourage you to all think very carefully about your vote tonight. And this is a meaningless resolution, and it's going to be a blotch on the town of Tiverton.
I just wanted to give the opportunity for one member of the public that is in support of the resolution, if they'd like to have a second chance to speak, since I allowed Ms. Monroe to speak. Any objection to closing the public comment? Okay, the floor is open on the council. I guess I'll give Mr. Katz the first word, then councilors that wish to speak in opposition, if they'd like priority after Mr. Katz.
Mainly, I just want to make something abstract kind of concrete. There are two ways a law-abiding gun owner becomes a criminal. They become a criminal, or the law changes out from under them. One statute that I mentioned earlier, it's H5022, states, new law, no person shall carry a rifle or shotgun in any vehicle or conveyance on or about the person, whether visible or concealed. There are exceptions. And then, every person violating the provisions of this subsection shall, upon conviction, be punished for imprisonment for not less than 1 year and up to 10. So what this means is if this becomes law and you carry a rifle in your truck, which you maybe habitually do for display, for self-protection, whatever it may be, you will now be a criminal, and if you did carry the gun, they'll take it away and you'll be put in prison. The judge will have no option, 1 full year. This is how good people become criminals when the law changes. So that's the one concrete point I wanted to make.
Mr. President, just to follow up, it's been represented that, for example, the Massachusetts assault weapons ban and other similar restrictions have been held to be constitutional. And while that's technically true and that the First Circuit has rendered a decision, the time period to file a petition for cert to the Supreme Court is 90 days from the rendering of that opinion. And so that appeals process has not necessarily played itself out to the extent that that matters to the council. In addition, Mr. Katz just noted the issue of transportation of firearms. There's a case currently pending before the United States Supreme Court dealing with the City of New York's transportation restrictions. So that's scheduled to be argued in October. But there are certainly compelling arguments that those restrictions are in fact not constitutional, and it's a question that's for the U.S. Supreme Court to decide.
Okay, I want to make sure all 7 of us have a shot to speak. And I'd like to give priority, if anybody wants priority, to speak in opposition.
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
I would just like to say that I don't think 7 of us should be making a decision for the entire town. I think if you want to make a stand on this, we should put the resolution out for the people to vote, and then you go to the state with all of those people that voted in favor or against this and show them this is what we want. I think that's the way to do it, rather than 7 people make a decision for the whole town of Tiverton.
You guys had your time, this is our time. Okay, I do have comments, but I prefer to, does anyone else like to hear?
Can I just, Justin, you are, I understand these resolutions have been done in other cities, and that prompted you to look into this. I also know that you are attuned to what is going on, and you've just mentioned in Providence. And just as a way of background, I can remember 4 or 5 years ago spending many afternoons, because there was a very serious effort going on in Rhode Island to seriously take away gun rights. And the people won that battle 4 or 5 years ago, but it doesn't stop. So, Justin, you've mentioned this one act that you've sort of indicated that you want to do this as a way of just sending a message. And you've mentioned this one, H5022. Are you aware of other current pending legislation that is also threatening that, like, why are these cities making these resolutions now?
Well, I don't know all the legislation that's going through. Luckily, I didn't have to read it all this year. But this is one that came on my radar that I think is particularly germane in that it shows how such an infringement could happen. And I think this is in keeping with the red flag legislation that passed last year, and which similar approaches. And as we saw with the firefighter overtime bill, sometimes legislation that you think isn't going to pass just all of a sudden does. So that's why I thought it was good to get this on an agenda quickly and make whatever statement we were intending to make.
Okay. And I've also, it's my understanding, reading this, that, and several people have mentioned that this really does nothing. It is just it's just a message. It has no legal effect of any kind. It's not going to change any law or action of the police or the town, anything that's going on.
I would say that's true.
Any other?
So I'll second somewhat what Councilor Perry said, which is that I don't really think, and just based on what I've anecdotally seen on Facebook and the number of emails that I've received, that there's any sort of clear opinion on this from the citizens of Tiverton, first of all. But secondly, tonight we keep referring to this as a resolution, but what the resolution says is relating to declaration of Tiverton as a Second Amendment sanctuary town. And I will say that as a concept in general for anything, I don't support any kind of sanctuary town for any reason. I think we've heard a lot about the Constitution tonight, and if the Constitution is the highest, most important law in the land, the Constitution lays out the process of the United States being a country of laws and how we abide by those laws, how we change those laws, and how we challenge those laws. So and we as citizens participate in this. We elect the legislators to the legislative branch and the executive branch. We have the right to lobby them and petition them before they make laws, and we hope they represent us. And if we feel that they don't represent us, then the judicial branch is there to ensure that they don't impose on us laws that violate our constitutional rights. And that's the process. That's how it works. That's what first and foremost makes America a country of laws. And all of a sudden, this concept of sanctuary cities has come along. It started with immigration enforcement. Now it's Second Amendment rights. Next month, it's going to be something else. And maybe in this particular case, the statement is, well, this doesn't really mean anything. It's really just a statement. Well, I tend to agree with the town administrator. It's a little more than a statement. As soon as you start talking about discretion and direction of the police department, it's more than a statement. And if this idea of sanctuary cities and towns for various things all over the United States continues to go in the direction that it's going in, at some point, the United States isn't going to be a country of laws anymore. We're going to be a whole bunch of patchwork of tribal fiefdoms where various municipalities and counties pick which laws they're going to abide by and which laws they're not going to. So, on principle, I just can't support something that says, we're not just saying that we don't agree with this. We're making a statement that says, in some way, form, or another, we're not going to abide by a potential law. And I don't like some of the laws that come out of Providence any better than other people do. And I most certainly respect anybody's right to challenge a law that they think that they've been aggrieved by. But I don't think the solution is to start putting stakes in the sand and saying, we don't like that law, so we're not going to do it. Somebody said earlier, and this is on a personal level, what we swear to do as elected officials. And so, and as it was stated, it's not exactly correct. So I'm going to read you exactly what I said when I ended up sitting up here, even though I'm just a counselor in a little town in Rhode Island. But I raised my right hand and I said, I do solemnly swear that I will support and enforce and abide by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America and of the state of Rhode Island. That's what I said I would do, and it means something to me. And I realize there's a possibility that there may be laws passed in Providence that aren't constitutional, and they have a right to be challenged in court. But until that time, as a counselor, I took an oath, and I promised that I would do that. So that's what I have to do.
Come on.
I said something before.
So I guess I'll try to summarize and I'll see what I can do to try to find perhaps common ground. Sometimes works, and sometimes, well, often fails miserably, but I'll try. So my view on this, and as someone that has taken, I think, 8 oaths of public office, once as a midshipman, once as a naval officer, once to the Rhode Island bar, once to the Massachusetts bar, and 4 times in Tiverton in 4 elected offices. It's, I think, unfortunate that I'm hearing these sort of phrases such as stunts and divisiveness, and we've seen other towns. You can tell by the well-meaning arguments here today that there's good faith arguments on both sides, and I think it's just disappointing that we don't get distracted by that kind of a thing. And I've also heard, and I've heard others say this too, and I've seen this before, when I've sat in roles like this where there's speeches and there's arguments, there's sort of like these strawman arguments about arguing that we're doing something that just isn't what it does. As I tried to preface this debate, this resolution does 2 things. One, it affirms discretion in the police department. I think I heard the police chief say he uses discretion every single day. So, and I think I heard a majority of speakers say that they don't think that this resolution does anything, which I disagree with on the second part. But I do think on the first part, affirming discretion, all it's doing is affirming that. So there can't possibly be a suggestion that this is interfering with the police department. And there also can't be an argument that there's some fatal flaw of ambiguity or discretion, because you just heard the police chief say he uses discretion every day. So to me, I feel like that's a relatively easy issue. I think we can hopefully all agree that I heard the school committee has done this as well as town council, has taken resolutions, perhaps non-binding, expressing support or not expressing support. So if this resolution were to pass, even if it did not involve an affirmative policy decision of this council, which I think the second part does, there's nothing different than that. And it is a complicated issue, and there's some really hot topic issues. Slavery was legal and held to be constitutional in Plessy versus Ferguson, perhaps I would say the worst decision to ever happen in the history of the country, eventually overturned. So it's more complicated than to say that something is clearly constitutional or not constitutional, and that nobody has a role in that process. So these are just sort of my thoughts. And I guess the one area where I would disagree, perhaps with some on the council even, is on the second part. I do think that the council, which by the way has to make decisions all the time on items that don't go to direct ballot voting. That's why we're elected. It happens all the time. I didn't run on the solar ordinance repeal. It was the first thing that came up in our first meeting. You know, that's why we're here, is to make some tough calls. And I do support, and perhaps I will in a future election, although that's another conversation about what gets going to ballot and what doesn't. But perhaps there should be input from others, from the whole town on a policy issue. And I do have some concerns on the slippery slope argument of where do we draw the line on how many of these issues come before the town for discussions like this, which I think are good, healthy discussions, but to be fair, they do take time and there's a lot of work to be done. I think the suggestion should be, one, try to find a connection to an impact on the town, as I believe the second part of this resolution does. So these are just my views. And with that, I'll stop talking. So the floor is open for a motion. If
Mr. President, I have two questions pertaining to a motion. I noticed in the Portsmouth ones earlier, part of the resolution was to send the document out. Obviously, other towns don't put that in and then send it out. Is that just assume that if we pass a resolution, we would expect that it would be sent to other town councils?
What's our practice?
But it doesn't have to be in the resolution.
Okay. Is this pretty close to the mark to the other towns' resolutions? I'm just
Almost exactly.
I'm sorry. Exactly.
Pretty much.
Okay.
But I did want to, in addition to what's, and I'll read the resolution part, not all the with whereases, but I did want to add, and just to make sure this is okay for me to do, to the be it further resolved, the affirmation of exercise of sound discretion. I wanted to end that sentence with, in accordance with department policy and the chain of command. Does that? Okay.
I'm sorry, Mike.
It's fine from a notice standpoint if that's what he's asking.
All right, so, Mr. President, I would like to move passage of a resolution relating to declaration of Tiverton as a Second Amendment sanctuary town with various whereas clauses ending, now therefore be it resolved by the Tiverton Town Council that the town of Tiverton be and hereby is declared to be a Second Amendment sanctuary town. Be it further resolved that the Tiverton Town Council affirms its support for the Tiverton Police Department to exercise sound discretion when enforcing laws impacting the rights of citizens under the Second Amendment in accordance with department policy and the chain of command. Be it further resolved that the Tiverton Town Council will not appropriate funds for capital construction of building space or purchase of storage systems to store weapons seized pursuant to the requirements set forth in any legislation if such bill is enacted by the Rhode Island General Assembly and/or for the purpose of enforcing any other law that unconstitutionally infringes upon the right of the people of the town of Tiverton to keep and bear arms. And with that resolution, I would request that the town clerk be instructed to submit a copy of this resolution to the town of Tiverton's state senators and representatives in the Rhode Island General Assembly, the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, the Governor, the Executive Director of the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, and all the cities and towns in the state of Rhode Island.
How about the citizens?
And that's a motion for passage.
We have a motion. Will there be a second?
I'll second it.
I think you've all had our say. Is there any objection to proceeding directly to a vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any? Was that? What? I missed the count. 3-4. Motion fails.
No.
No, 4-3, right?
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
3 in the affirmative, 4.
Okay.
No.
Who voted in the affirmative?
Nancy voted again.
Nancy, what was your vote?
Against.
Against. 3-4. Okay. Motion fails. Can I close out this item? Is there any further activity on the table? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, so we're back in session, and as I said, the floor is still open. My question is, will there be any more motions, or shall we continue on the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion.
The subject is closed.
I'd like to make a motion.
And someone in the affirmative can bring it back up.
I don't understand this idea that just because one motion fails, that the entire matter is concluded.
So that matter, the resolution of that issue generally is not controlled by law, right? It's controlled by the operating customs and procedures that any particular town council has adopted. So whatever custom is here in Tiverton is what you should do. From a notice standpoint.
From a notice, you notice.
From a notice standpoint, in terms of
Could you
compliance.
use the microphone?
We can't hear you. From a notice standpoint, in terms of compliance with the State Open Meetings Act, you're in compliance. But from a policy standpoint, that's a decision that you would all have to make about whether it's appropriate.
But as a notice, it failed.
Yes.
Right, the notice that went out with what this topic was failed.
Well, you can continue to consider an issue.
I don't understand this idea that there can only be one motion on an agenda item. And if there's another motion that is not identical, just like we do all the time to the past motion, the floor is open. If after 2 calls I don't hear another motion, I'm moving on to the agenda. The question is there another motion relevant to this agenda item?
Yes.
Councilor Driggs, what is your motion?
I would like to make a motion for consideration that the second part be, if the words could be added, and/or for the purpose of enforcing any other law that is deemed to be unconstitutional, infringes upon the right of the people of town of Tiverton.
May I ask a question of the proposer?
Sure, point of information, go ahead.
Deemed unconstitutional by who?
A court.
Is that a point of information or a point of debate?
It's a question.
Any other law that is judicially deemed unconstitutional. That's the only one who can deem something unconstitutional.
Nancy, does your motion still pick up that added language that Mr. Katz added to the first part?
In accordance with department policy
Right,
or
right,
change, yes.
So all you've done is you've taken the motion which failed, which you just voted against, but added language you prefer, which says any other law that is deemed, you're adding 2 words, is deemed. Judicially deemed?
It's the only people who can deem it, isn't it? Unconstitutional.
Additionally deemed to be unconstitutional to the town of Tiverton, is that what you said? That's what I wrote.
Okay, we have a main motion on the floor. Will there be a second to that main motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Open for debate. Those wishing to speak in opposition, if they want it, can have priority.
People left.
Victoria Neville of Connecticut Street, I'd like to know what is going on with this town council right now. Everybody just left. You didn't say, we are going to have another one. I just thank Nancy Driggs for voting for us, just to find out she's coming up with another resolution that it's going to be 4-3. I don't understand what this town council is doing. Nobody is here. Everybody left, and you didn't say there's going to be 2 parts here.
Actually, I did say that the floor is still open, but we're taking an administrative recess.
You didn't say that before everybody left.
I did.
Yes, he
I did, actually.
Well, maybe you might want to turn these mics up, because I've complained about it. I've talked to Justin Katz about it. I'm home. I cannot usually stay here because I physically cannot do this with arthritis. I can't hear at home. I can't hear when I'm in the building. This is important that we can hear what you're saying. Obviously, no one heard what you were saying, because even the yellow people wouldn't have left if they knew another thing was coming up. So is this what we're going to do? We're going to change it when everybody's gone, and now it's going to be 4-3?
That's not.
That's exactly what's going to happen. This town council, I have the petition to get Justin Katz and Mr. Coulter off the town council because this town council cannot function the way it's going. It's your way or the highway. That was a slick move, and you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Ruth Hollenbach, resident of Tiverton. If you can't hear, please sit in the front.
I said it.
Okay. And also,
I couldn't hear when I was sitting here.
Okay, let's all say calmly that they did say it was going to continue, whether we heard it back here or I don't know. I heard it, yes, I heard it. No, several people.
I didn't hear it.
And whether you
I was getting ready to leave.
just if you understood it, okay, but it is complicated. It's getting late, and it is true that it's taking time, and that is difficult, and that's just one thing I wanted to say, that state and local really have a lot of responsibility to have input into our government, and so I would rather send a message like this to the state rather than having to go and every 5 years fight the same fight every time. Everybody doesn't have a lot of time for these things, you know? It takes a lot of time. Thank you for that.
I would like to, see if we could like render that a motion, like edit it in like because that's perfect, that's beautiful. And as a representative of the Second Amendment community, we would willingly accept that. And if make a motion to vote that in tonight, that'd be awesome.
Well, I guess, I have no objection to holding the matter to another public meeting if you really think that that three-word addition, and I should say there's no legal right, this is not a public hearing. So for those of you that wish to disparage the leadership of the council, you should know that you had an hour and a half of public debate, which, some councils wouldn't have given you that.
Oh, my gosh.
So I don't know what, and I also think we need to consider the time, since we're at 10 o'clock. So perhaps we should consider a special meeting on the 10th. We can consider this motion then. We can pick up the other agenda items. I guess I should put Nancy in the hot seat and ask what you think you'd like to see happen here. And I'm fine coming back on the 10th, and we can have another hour and a half debate over these three words if you want to.
Resolution.
Move it to the 10th.
We're also here tomorrow night.
Yeah, but it's too late. You need to give the people of Tiverton notice.
The problem I have is just because people choose to get up and make a big storm out of the building, and I don't design the public announcement system, so I'm happy to reschedule it for debate. But I think that's very inappropriate to suggest that there's something untoward going on just because a main motion failed. As you know, because you come to every council meeting, that we often have multiple main motions until one passes or until there's no main motion. So why don't we, I'm going to suggest that we take a motion to adjourn this meeting, and we will call a special meeting 1 week from tonight on Monday, June 10th. I'll put this back on the agenda. We can put those three words on there, and we can do this all over again.
So next week, the same.
Do we have to have the same public meeting again?
June 10th is our regular scheduled one.
I'm sorry, June 3rd. Thank you.
June 3rd?
My apologies.
I'm taking Sparky to New York.
We don't have to have
Mr.
another
President.
public hearing, though, do we?
No, we only have public hearings because the chair allows them.
I would just note that there are additional items to complete
Right,
tonight.
and our council rules that after 10 o'clock, unless 2/3 of you want to stay, then we should be adjourning anyway, so.
Mr. President, before you do, could you just repeat that? I want to make sure I have the words that you were adding. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Enforcing any other law that is judicially deemed to unconstitutionally infringe upon the right of the people.
All right, the chair proposes a motion to adjourn this meeting and to call for a special meeting on Monday, June 3rd. Will there be a motion in support of the chair's suggestion?
Is it a special meeting?
A special meeting. This is not a public hearing, so we don't need to even continue it.
So Rob, are we going to put the rest of the agenda on June 3rd?
Absolutely. And what did we just continue something else? Let's do the ordinances too. Can we do that?
Oh, wait
What
a
did you
minute
say about
here,
this
before we
Jordan?
get ahead of ourselves.
could be a
I
little
also
late.
have a request for June 3rd for two of the applicants for solicitor that cannot make it
Perfect, we'll do that too.
tomorrow.
Problem solved.
So,
I make a motion to continue, is that a good way to put this? That's fine. To continue the rest of this agenda, including the topic, whatever that number is.
10C.
10C to the meeting on June 3rd, in addition to interviewing the two other applicants for attorneys.
Solicitor.
Solicitor. Same thing.
And I would, well,
What is the thing I said we were holding to June 10th? Those
The
fees and
audit.
fines, right? So that-
fees and fines for the recreation and the car show event, you wanted me to put it on consent.
Okay, so that's got to be the 10th, because I've already given that. All right. Okay.
May
Is there
I-
a second? Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
I do have one question, and I was going to wait until the solicitor announcements, but I'm going to ask it since we're going to adjourn. Since I met Mr. Fabish tonight. So, Mr. Ciccione is not here tonight, obviously. But, Mr. Fabish, do you work for Cameron and Middleman?
I'm a subcontractor for Cameron.
You're a subcontractor for Cameron and Middleman. Okay.
Excuse me, who's that for? Who's the sub, who does he work for?
He's a subcontractor.
Well, do you work for a different firm?
I am a sole practitioner.
Oh, okay. So you have your own firm?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Can I get a second to that motion? The chair supports the
Second.
motion. All right, all those in favor? Okay. This matter will be continued on Monday, June 3rd. There will be a special meeting on Monday, June 3rd. We'll pick up the rest of the agenda items, and I may well put the two ordinances on as well. But the fees and fines will be on June 10th, as stated. We will have two other, we will be here tomorrow night at 6:30. 6:30. We will conduct two candidate interviews, and we have an executive session matter tomorrow night. We'll be back a week from Monday.
Excuse me, sir.
Good night.
Just have clarification. This Second Amendment sanctuary will be held up into June 3rd? Is that one?
June 3rd,
And
first
that-
thing on the agenda.
Okay.
7
And
o'clock.
we're allowed to speak also, and, I mean, at least come to, I don't know if it's private or what.
I'm sorry, the interviews might be first. We're going to accommodate the candidate schedule.
Yeah. That's fine.
I try to let people speak.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't get credit for it, but I try to let them
Well, you
speak.
did, I heard you,
If there's,
so.
if there's 500 people in the room, I'm probably going to cap it at an hour.
All right. So June 3rd.
Yeah, I probably won't be here, June 12th. I'll be here with the lawyers.
Good night,
All right, thank you,
everybody.
sir.
Thank you.